Avatar. Playing Waterbending. Chapter 21. Haru got arrested and is going to be executed. I repeated after Kai. I was exhausted from the 8-hour trip on foot, followed by hunting beasts. I wanted to confirm what I had heard, because I had left Haru lying on a bed next to his mother that very morning. You heard me, Kai replied. There was an elder named Saizu, short, bald, and with a bad leg. He got trapped in an abandoned mine while looking for silver to sell. Haru, who had been out touring, couldn't help but assist when the mine started to crumble. He used his earthbending powers to rescue him. The poor guy. I told him that kindness would be his downfall. Now, he's been snitched on by the person he saved. The hell, how did this happen? I snarled. I didn't even know why I was so angry. I didn't know the man that well, yet I felt so bad because I knew he was just a friendly young man from the neighborhood. And I thought helping you was the worst thing one could do. Hey, I have feelings, Kai retorted. For now, Kai wasn't important. Not only had Haru been caught, but he was going to be executed as an example, which I had never seen happen in the canon. Other earthbenders had been taken to a metal jail, but the one who hit himself was going to be beheaded. You said they're going to execute him, I said, gripping Kai by the shoulders. When? Why was I acting like this? It wasn't as though there was anything I could do to stop it if it was going to happen soon, but I knew it would be painful if it did. Part of me still hoped the execution would be scheduled far in the future, so I could hold on to the hope that I might still be able to do something about it. I hated being weak. I hated the feeling of talking to someone one day and knowing they were going to be dead the next. Life didn't move that fast. Kai sighed and patted my shoulder. Must be the first time you've seen something like this, someone, or their family, being punished, right? I get how you're feeling. Relax. It's not like you can do anything about it. Answer me, I said, shaking his shoulder. A week from now, he grimaced. To be exact, 6 days. On Friday. Thank you. I let go of his shoulders and walked away, not feeling any guilt for possibly hurting Kai by squeezing him too hard. I headed to Haru's house, to the room I was renting. I needed a place to think calmly. If someone who has been playing them for so long is going to get executed, what will happen to me? I thought. My biological parents are participating in the rebellion, so nothing will happen to them. But on the other hand, this shows just how cruel those soldiers are. I sat by the bed and cupped my head with both hands. Shit. The South Pole isn't far from this base. What can I do? I thought. On one hand, I didn't have a deep attachment to Haru. We had known each other for only a few days, and he had been quite helpful. On the other hand, I didn't want to feel powerless. I also thought that seeing someone I had a good impression of die in front of me was a horrible feeling. I didn't know if that was true, and I didn't want to know. The sensation of powerlessness was more bitter than anything I could have ever felt. What if he were someone I had known well or had a deep connection with? Was I just going to sit idly by and do nothing? I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew what I didn't want to do. I don't want to feel powerless. I thought, now that I was calm. All right. 6 days. I looked out the window. 6 days. If I can't at least make a dent in the centipede, I won't do a thing, and I won't feel guilty about it. But if I don't reach level 10 in waterbending, I'm gay. I had just come up with the ultimate self-motivation a male ego could handle. It might sound ridiculous, but it was effective. I had already made up my mind. I would go camp in the forest, or at least nearby. Wasting 8 hours each day traveling in and out would be a total waste of time. On the other hand, I thought about the storage. Since this was the land, and I would need more storage, for ammo, I needed to upgrade my inventory. Plus, I would need food if I was staying out there for an extended period. 10,000 accumulated experience points have been used to upgrade the storage. The storage was upgraded from the size of a small room to a mid-sized apartment. I could now store up to 10 water barrels, along with plenty of room for food and other necessities. I packed my things into my storage, then took a walk. On the way, I gave my stats one last look. Skill trees. Waterbending. Level 9. Kai bending. Level 7. Skills. Hunting. Level 8. Fishing. Level 4. Freeze. Level 8. Titles. 1/1 The Beast's Hunter. Accumulated experience. 8200. Early in the morning, Kai stretched his arms as he walked toward his cart. He had just finished yawning and was ready for another day of work. The night had passed peacefully with nothing major happening. It was just another day to make a living. Suddenly, he stopped. There, in front of him, was his cart. But there was no cabbage in it. Inside, there was a letter. Dear Cabbage Merchant. We have heard about the miraculous healing effects of your cabbage. Because of that, we've decided to take it to help the sick heal. We sincerely apologize for not having enough funds at the moment, but you'll be paid in the form of good karma. National Medicine Association. I smiled widely as I took a bite of the cabbage. My lips were twitching. Every 15 minutes, I would remember what I had done and burst into laughter. I wished I were still in the village to see Kai's reaction. At least now he wouldn't be messing with sick people's families to sell his stuff. I stopped and stared ahead. Since it was dawn, most predators were heading back to their lairs, and only weaker animals stayed. Good enough for me, I muttered. This is going to be the longest grind of my life. At the forest that was filled with dangerous and large animals and insects. The first time I was here, I had to rely on praying, luck, and trees to survive. But this time, I was better prepared. I couldn't afford to play it safe, as my self-esteem was on the line. I needed to grind to preserve my male pride. I entered the forest, not walking comfortably. My heart thundered in my ears, and I could practically feel water dripping from the sweat on my skin. There was a simple reason for my fear, that giant centipede. It was so intimidating that I feared seeing it in my nightmares. Around my shoulders were two tentacles, ready for any emergencies. Shaking my head, I spotted a stray wolf with an exceptionally long neck. It was much larger and more muscular than the cub I had killed that day. Grr. It howled at me, taking a defensive stance. It seemed to be one of the survivors from the wolf pack I had attacked a few days ago. The only difference this time was that I wasn't perched on top of a tree. Did you know some animals can hold a grudge for a long time? Take camels, for example. You could hit one today, and 20 years later, you might meet it again. It would remember you and turn into a John Wick out of nowhere. It would wait until you were alone or asleep, then kill you when no one was watching. Some animals were absurdly smart and could hold grudges, they were just that petty. Come here, little puppy. I pointed at it, and a spear appeared in my hand. The wolf lunged at me, its long neck coming from an unexpected angle, trying to bite me. One tentacle pushed against the ground, shoving me backward, while the other morphed into a sharp ice spike that pierced through the wolf's eye. As I landed on my feet, I sent another tentacle with a wave of my arm, turning it into a sharp spear that pierced through the wolf's neck. Long-necked wolf has been defeated. Waterbending plus 200 Express. Plus 1680 accumulated experience. I caught my breath, calming down. Compared to last time, I had improved a lot. The previous time, I had to rely on a high-level freezing skill to deal with it, and I had nearly lost to a young wolf. Now, I could face a beast on equal footing without using much water. Reminds me of Katara in the canon. She just used drinking water. Man, I thought to myself. That's totally unfair. If I could, I'd learn to use water from my surroundings. But the thing about waterbending is that the purer the water, the easier it is to bend. If you add some mud, it becomes moderately difficult. If it's mixed with other substances, forget it. It would be more like metal bending. If it were easy to bend anything with water in it, freezing humans would be done with a flick, and waterbenders would have been the ones to conquer the world by now. I rubbed the back of my head and poured a thin layer of water around the dead wolf's body, then froze it. You might wonder why I froze it. Last time, there were many dead animals on the ground, and it attracted a large insect. I didn't know why, but I thought of dead animals in general. When they die, they're usually surrounded by bugs and worms within 24 hours. So, freezing them was a security measure I came up with while walking on the road. You know, when you walk for 8 hours each day, you think about a lot of things. Okay. Level 9 is definitely on a whole different level compared to level 8. I wonder what it'll feel like when I hit level 10. I murmured. The answer was obvious. Straight. A few more wolves approached after their kin let out their last howl. I looked at them and smiled. I wasn't the same man who would cling to a tree and shoot from afar anymore. I quickly jumped to the nearest tree and climbed it with my tentacles. Just because I was stronger didn't mean I wouldn't do the smarter thing, which was to take the route with the lowest risk and highest reward. The wolves surrounded me and jumped high, trying to bite me. Those who jumped were met with rain pouring down on them, created by my tentacles, before I froze it onto them. Seriously, why would I use advanced, exhausting waterbending techniques to deal with small fries? Killing long-necked wolf. Killing long-necked wolf. Killing long-necked wolf. Killing long-necked wolf. Waterbending plus 300 Express. Waterbending plus 300 Express. Freeze plus plus plus. I remembered why one should use advanced waterbending techniques. It was to gain more raw experience in their skill. There was around 16,800 accumulated experience gained. I jumped off the tree, thinking about freezing the dead bodies by covering them in water. But then, an idea hit me. Sure, I may not be able to bend blood now, but shouldn't I be able to bend it when it's outside the body? I grabbed a knife from my storage and made a cut in the neck of a freshly dead wolf. A sensation of water weight tickled the back of my head. I moved my hand, and a bit of blood floated. Surely, the response time is slower compared to pure water, and it feels heavier. On the other hand, it's possible to use it outside the body. I thought to myself, maybe bloodbending is just heavy lifting with a little amount of water. If I tried to lift a heavy human using a certain amount of water, I wouldn't be able to do it because the weight matters. Bloodbending was the same as lifting a human-sized rock by making the water around it float, which is incredibly difficult to do. And if it were easy, waterbenders would have an advantage over every other bender. It's just really heavy lifting. I get the key now. I need to do heavy weight training with waterbending or level up Kai bending to unlock bloodbending. I thought to myself. In that case, I can think of two things. First, Kai bending. The higher the level, the more water I can bend, and the faster and stronger the water responds to my bending. Second, I can go the bodybuilder route, lifting objects with water and increasing the weight while keeping the amount of water the same each time. For now, let me try this. I put my hand on the cut and tried to sense the water, using my visualization to freeze it. The body became stiff. Discovering an advanced skill under the tree skill, waterbending. Waterbending plus 7000 Express. Sub-skill, freezing palm. As long as there is a cut, you can freeze people by touching them. Waterbending level 2 low. May need extra time and direct physical contact to activate the skill. I cupped my chin, thinking, nice. I moved to another body, put my hand on it, and tried to use the freezing skill without making a cut. To say that I was disappointed would be an understatement. It took me 10 seconds to freeze it, and even then, I felt like I had wasted energy. Waterbending plus 500 Express. Freeze plus 100 Express. Shit, I cursed, falling onto my butt. Using a higher level skill, according to the system, required more energy. On the other hand, I realized something else. Although bloodbending was like intense weightlifting for now, freezing humans wasn't impossible. In fact, with a few more levels, it could be done from a distance. Anyway, I was pretty tired. I turned my head and climbed the nearest tree for observation purposes. I looked toward the direction of the sun, and it was about to set. It would be time for the strongest species in the forest to appear. Wow. Time passes quickly, I thought. Now, I had a problem on my hands. Where the hell would I put my shelter? I couldn't help but heave a sigh while sleeping peacefully inside my ice house. As a native of the South Pole and a waterbender, I could build these houses easily. They were cold on the outside and warm on the inside. One advantage was that they would be avoided by cold-blooded predators that lurked at night. The best advantage, however, was that it was made of ice, making it good for both defense and offense. I had a few triggered traps set up to make a noise in case something approached. Not to mention, I was half an hour away from the forest. This was the safest thing I could do for now. Other than that, today had been quite productive. Not only did I gain experience points and increase the experience bar for waterbending, but I had also learned something. If I could learn advanced skills, my level would jump higher, and I had been thinking of many strategies to deploy. One of the strategies I had thought of was spreading water on the ground and turning it into ice, so I would have an advantage against firebenders. Most firebenders depend on their feet. If you make the ground slippery, they are as good as non-benders. Anyways, I had 5 days left until the execution, and I wasn't even halfway to leveling up my waterbending. Day 2. Today, while hunting the wolves, I noticed something. The experience that I was getting decreased. All I managed to get from defeating a big wolf was only 1200 experience, despite having my title on. I guess getting stronger had its downsides as well. It's not like I can blame the system, I muttered to myself. One large mutt was running toward me at incredible speed. I tapped the wet ground with my foot. Ice spread from the point where I stepped, turning the ground into ice. The wolf lost its balance, tilted, and fell while rolling on the ground. I thrust my spear into its neck. Hunting up to level 9. Hunting, despite not being a waterbending skill, was very practical. It helped increase the success rate and my accuracy. Combining it with waterbending could turn me into a sniper. Though, the further the distance, the lower the success rate. Anyways, I put my hand on the newly defeated animal and froze its body. The prey was getting scarcer, so I started thinking that I should start hunting docile animals. Excessive hunting was bad, though. It would make the predators go on a rampage and attack each other. But the thing that I didn't have was time. I needed power urgently. On the positive side, I was developing ways to deal with enemies. Seeing that I had a few experience points left before leveling up my Kai bending, I decided to invest in it. Kai bending up to level 8. The ability to bend oneself's blood to boost power has been added. The skill is harmful and do self-damage in exchange for greater power. I took a look at my skills. Skill trees. Waterbending 9, 10,000 30,000. Kai bending 8. Skills. Hunting 9. Fishing 4. Freeze 8. Titles. 1/1. The Beast Hunter. Accumulated experience. 73,000. On second thought, no matter how strong I get, I'll still be human. So, maybe I should try sneaking up on animals and see if I can unlock a stealth skill, I thought to myself before heading to my ice house, reinforcing it, and healing the cuts I had gotten from the spikes and some bad moments. Day 4. Nothing interesting happened on day 3 except that I got halfway to level 10 through my efforts alone. In total, I had accumulated around 150,000 experience points, ready to be used at any time. My freeze skill had finally reached the 9th level, and I had gained a new skill through sneaking up behind animals. Plus skill. Stealth, passive, level 1. Reduces the presence and sound produced by the user. Lowers the chance of being detected from a blind spot. On the other hand, I was in the worst mental and physical state possible. There were dark bags under my eyes, my clothes had been torn, and I believe I had lost a couple of kilograms. What's worse, I didn't even remember the self-bet I made. Would it still be gay if I used the accumulated experience points? But I didn't remember thinking about that. Such questions kept me awake in my ice house, doing exercises to increase my experience points. Even so, I would still have to face that centipede. There are 2 days left until the execution, so tomorrow will be the day I test myself against it. If I don't do any damage despite the training, Haru, I'm sorry, you will be remembered. If I manage to do something to it, I will attack the Fire Nation base, I thought to myself. I was currently next to my ice house. I had a stick of ice linking 2 frozen barbells, each weighing hundreds of kilograms, and I was curling them up. You may be wondering if I had become superhuman to lift such heavy weights. Well, in fact, I was using waterbending. And the goal wasn't to lift the water but to lift the wooden container. Waterbending plus 100 Express. Waterbending plus 100 Express. Day 5. I was pretty confused as to whether this was the 5th day or the 6th day. My stupid ego had led me to grind all day long, and I didn't notice when I fell asleep. When I woke up, it took me a while to figure out what time of day it was. It was before sunset. And luckily, the system had a notification log, which was well timed, so I could easily tell that I hadn't overslept into the 6th day. For some reason, I thought the sun was rising from the west, I thought. Waterbending level 9, 29,000 30,000. I was only 1,000 experience points short from proving to myself that I was straight. I hurriedly did more curls with water and tried more complicated tasks, like eating with water tentacles. Thankfully, it took only half an hour to accumulate that much, and it didn't drain too much energy. Waterbending up to level 10, 60 thousandths. Since I was going to hunt a centipede and move at night, I figured I could use my newly acquired skills and level up some others. I had over 150,000 experience points, which would be enough to upgrade my waterbending by one more level. But after that, I would need 120,000, as the system would double the required amount, and I wouldn't have enough by then, only around 90,000. 90,000 experience points, however, were essential. My strongest weapon now was using the freezing skill, and I had adapted to its application over the last few days. It had reached the 9th level, making it quite overpowered. I decided that if my freezing wasn't cold enough to beat a strong monster, I would leave just enough experience points to level it up, which was around 20,000 now. Time to see if my effort had paid off. Using 60,000 accumulated experience points. Waterbending up to level 11, 120 thousandths. Using 12,700 accumulated experience points. Stealth up to level 8. Using 15,000 experience points. Kai bending up to level 9. Able to infuse Kai into fists and kicks to boost damage. Using 30,000 experience points. Kai bending up to level 10. 40% less Kai required when bending. Able to increase speed and power by 60%. I then looked at my stats. Skill trees. Waterbending 11. Kai bending 10. Skills. Hunting 9. Fishing 4. Freeze 9. Stealth, passive 8. Titles. 1/1. The Beast Hunter. Accumulated experience. 32,000. An unlimited amount of information and muscle memory appeared out of nowhere, reminding me of the time I gained consciousness at 3 to 4 years old. I felt like Neo from the Matrix movie when he said that he knew Kung Fu. I would have felt proud if not for the fact that I had to face a wreck tomorrow, and before that, I had to follow the plan I had made to face the 20-meter centipede. Initially, I planned to face it as soon as I got waterbending to level 10. But now, I had it at level 11. And between each level, there was an exponential requirement to ascend, and moreover, exponential growth. Last time I reached a new level, I could control tentacles on my shoulders with a twitch and even shoot pellets. Now, I was quite excited to test it. Before the battle, I decided to run a small test. Shaw, a commander from the Fire Nation, was invited to an occupied village that housed a prison for earthbenders. The warden had invited him to discuss the recent capture of an earthbender, who had managed to stay under their radar for his entire 18 years of life. Shaw, a black-haired, golden-eyed middle-aged man, stared at the man in his 40s. Around him were two guards with masks covering their faces. The reason for the masks was simple: to avoid being attacked by the families of the imprisoned earthbenders. "So, how have you been, my old friend?" said the warden. "Old friend, my ass," replied Shaw, to the warden he had served under years ago. "I'm young enough to be your grandson." He grumbled, "My son is only 16 years old." Shaw smiled. "And you're still as moody as always." "What can I say? Running a prison and raising a family can be mentally tough. Considering the recent events of finding a new earthbender and holding a survivor from the South Pole, I must say that I'm going to have my hair turning gray soon." "But your hair is already gray," deadpanned the commander. "Guess time passes quickly," frowned the warden. "Anyways, why did you invite me for the execution?" Shaw said. "I understand you want to get an achievement and have a witness, but I didn't have to be here for that, did I?" "That's only part of my plan," the warden smirked. "Since there are earthbenders hiding, I'm planning to make an announcement after the execution. Those who don't turn themselves in will have their families executed. After that, I'm planning to execute the man's mother and father." "Isn't that too harsh?" said the commander. Prison wardens, in general, were known for their sadistic personalities and merciless hearts. But even to Shaw, that level of cruelty seemed extreme. Yet, it didn't seem unnecessary, as it would help get rid of potential enemies who could mass kill their soldiers. On the other hand, Shaw didn't like it for a reason. He had a suspicion that the warden was doing this because he was frustrated about not getting promoted. "What's there to consider?" The warden waved his hand. "Is it better to see our men being ambushed by earthbenders? We would announce a search, and those who turn themselves in before the search would have their lives and their families spared. Even if they don't turn themselves in, their families will. I can see it happening. Even if the prisoners have hidden their relatives, bending, they'd snitch on them. Such a tactic would save more lives than killing them. This brings me to my second point, said the warden. Your older brother, Cow, was sent not long ago to search for a waterbender in the South Pole. I told him it would be a waste of time and not to trust the natives who suffer from the cold, scoffed Shaw. Anyways, said the warden, one of his men managed to return alone, suffering from frostbite. We tried to get answers from him, and he woke up this morning after surgery. But he suffered trauma and couldn't speak properly. Shaw remained calm. And my brother, what happened to him? He still had his family to worry about. We don't know. After his man woke up, he cried and said that everyone was dead, and that they faced a monster. Do you think a waterbender did that to them? Probably, said Shaw. But even then, it doesn't make sense. It would if there were many waterbenders. But the last waterbender in the South Pole was killed a long time ago. And those who were capable of fighting joined the rebellion. A single waterbender or two wouldn't do anything against a full warship. Unless. It didn't make sense for a waterbender to do all of that. The firebenders had been fighting against waterbenders for a long time and had developed strategies to counter them. Against the North Pole, they had consistently fought without suffering many losses. Even in a naval battle, they knew how to capture a waterbender. Getting trapped in isolated land, with their anchor frozen, food disappearing, and engines ruined, plus starving for a few days, wasn't something they knew could happen, and they needed to prepare for it. Unless that waterbender is the Avatar. It's still a possibility. I wouldn't trust the words of a soldier who was the sole survivor, so I'm going to assume that waterbender is the Avatar, said the warden. It would make sense why one person could take down a whole trained unit. This is the reason you invited me, then. To avenge my brother and take part in finding the Avatar. What can I say? For a man my age, getting chances for achievements isn't something I can hope for frequently, he said. So, about my older brother, Shaw asked. He's probably about to die, the warden said. I've invited you so we could have more manpower when traveling to the south. The schedule? Asked the commander. After the execution, by a day, he replied. That waterbender, Shaw looked out the window, his emotions as calm as the surface of a lake on a windless night. Can he truly be the Avatar? The last Avatar was supposed to be born as an airbender. He may have lived a long life hiding like a coward and died peacefully, said the warden. The highest probability is that he's a waterbender in this life. We'll find out. The man they were discussing wasn't that concerned about the world. It was night, and Ryak cursed himself for taking on a daring challenge. Around his back were 6 tentacles, moving between the tree branches and pulling his weight. On the ground, there was a blue-black figure, 20 meters long. Ryak summoned a water barrel from thin air, smashed it with a water tentacle that had its end in the shape of a mace, and forced the water to pour onto the giant creature's back. The water froze, but the ice broke instantly. The creature raised its head 5 meters into the air and jumped after Ryak, who turned the water tentacles into a water barrier that he froze. The barrier flew away with Ryak, smashing a tree before turning back into water. Okay, Ryak said. I was trying to avoid doing this. But you gave me no choice. I felt like Dr. Octopus with all those arms around my back. Anyway, I was using Kai bending to increase my bending response speed and my own speed, while avoiding the large predator. I was dodging and attacking hopelessly. The freezing didn't work, as it managed to break the ice every time I froze it around it, even though my freezing abilities had improved. It reminded me of a deep wisdom. If violence doesn't work, then more violence is the answer. There was one thing I could do. After I put some distance between us, I opened my system window, selected the freeze skill, and allocated my experience points to it. A confirmation message popped up, and in the background, there was an intimidating face I couldn't quite describe. Even though it was night, it looked terrifying as it approached me with incredible speed. Freeze up to level 10. I pushed my hands forward, and the tentacles extended, pressing against its face. I lifted my hands, and the water tentacles pulled my weight, raising me above the predator. I continued running until I was far from its head. The last thing I wanted was to get bitten while trying to freeze it. All I need is to make one wound. I placed my hand on it, spreading water from 2 tentacles over its surface and freezing it. A very cold breeze swept through the air. Even for a waterbender like me, this was too much cold. HSHSHSHs. The giant insect lurched, trying to push me away. It's in pain. Defrost, I thought. One water tentacle transformed its end into the shape of a blade and slashed through. Did you know that freezing things and then defrosting them causes them to break on a molecular level? I made a wound about the length of my arm. It may not seem like much given the animal's size, but it was enough for me. There were two things I could do now. 1. Bend the blood out of its body, it's still technically waterbending. Or I could just freeze it. Freeze, I thought as I placed my hand on the blood. A sharp, sensational feeling of the entire circulatory system of the animal flooded my mind. I was able to interrupt the sensation from my waterbending better this time. The centipede turned and attacked me with its large head. I had no choice but to dodge and leap away, clinging to a huge tree. The centipede's head collided with its tail, breaking it and severing that part of its body. It looked at me, hissed, and then turned away. I tried to run after it. But I thought it might have kids, siblings, or worse, parents. I stayed still. I must admit, Haru is a lucky son of a fool. The self-made deal indicated that if I couldn't hurt the centipede, I wouldn't do anything for his execution. But now, I had to attack the prison. The only problem is, I'm jack shit tired. I sighed heavily, looking down. An animal the size of a normal tiger appeared. After living in this forest for a few days, I realized that polar bears and tigers weren't that scary at all. The long-necked wolves were the most dangerous. It's very small compared to the others. Seems like I can tame it. I jumped off the tree. The water I had spilled during the fight with the centipede was pulled from the ground as I clapped my hands together, and it attached to my back. Grr. The tiger growled at me, slowly approaching. It was only 2 meters in length. Big enough to become nice ride. I thought as I pulled something from my storage, dried salted fish. I threw one of them. The animal lowered its head and sniffed. Its eyes lit up, and soon, it pounced on the fish. After it finished, it looked at me expectantly. But since I didn't give it more food, it growled at me. It's as if it's saying, I'm the alpha, and if you don't give me food, you'll be my food. I thought. In my previous life, I had a feral cat that I fed from the time it was a cub. But it used to threaten to hit me. After I stomped on the ground whenever it showed aggression, it became very tame. Very well. I'll name you Lucy, I said, stomping on the ground. The tiger jumped at me. The tentacles formed around my shoulder and held the tiger from the limbs. I clenched my fist, Kai boosted, and punched its face. Then I screamed at it. The growling stopped. Grr. I grabbed another fish from my head. The tiger tried to attack me to get it, and I could feel it through the twitches. Hush. I slapped it on the face and held it by the back of the neck. If you want it, you have to behave. Now, would you like to behave? The cat didn't show any aggressive response, and I pushed the fish to its head. It slowly ate. I increased the amount of fish and slowly let it down. Its attitude changed immediately, and I petted it on the head. It didn't fight back. I patted it, and it looked at me. It seemed to understand that I could feed it and that it couldn't defeat me. Okay, Lucy. There's a village 4 hours away. Once you get me there in less time, I'll feed you more, I said. A fish appeared in front of me, linked to a tentacle. I then quickly jumped on the little tiger's back and placed it in front of its face. The tiger walked to catch the fish, but as it stepped, the fish got farther away. Soon, it started running, and I controlled the direction towards the village. 1 hour later, Lucy was panting, and I was near the village. I placed all of the fish in front of it and let it eat to its heart's content. It gave me a side eye, as if it understood I'd played a trick on it, but it didn't do anything other than eat. Ding. You have tamed a young tiger. Ding. Would you like to name it? Sure. Lucy. I thought. You have named Lucy. Lucy. Age. 6 months. Favoritism. 20. Fear you, but understand that it depends on you if it wants to live. The system seemed to have established some type of connection. I could literally feel the emotions of the tiger. Just 6 months old. This animal had the potential to grow up to be huge. As for the favoritism, I figured I could do things to increase it. As long as I had a system, I would easily be able to distinguish what works and what doesn't. Lucy. I called. Lucy's eye twitched, but it didn't acknowledge me. Not if you understand, I said. It didn't reply. If you don't nod, I'll smash my tentacles up to your butthole, I threatened. The young tiger paused, slowly nodding. Lucy. Favoritism, -1. I don't care. As long as it's obedient. Good, I said. Now, Lucy. Stay here, and don't get into the village or attack any humans. Do you understand? The tiger gave me a side eye without nodding. I'll bring you back some food. So wait here. I said. Lucy. Favoritism +1. I smiled. Frankly, I didn't know if I would bring the food back or become food myself. Although I'd gotten stronger, I wasn't in the best shape. My eyelids were quite heavy, and if not for the adrenaline, I would have fallen asleep. There were dark bags under my eyes. But I couldn't. It was past midnight, and now was the best time to cause havoc for the Fire Nation. Plus, since I had acquired the stealth skill and raised it quietly, I was optimistic that I could sneak in. All that was left now was to find a firebender and take his armor and mask. To succeed, I needed 3 things: focus, commitment, and sheer fooling will. With that in mind, I turned the tentacles into an ice cube and stored them before walking toward the village that held the prison. Had gone quite far on foot, and then swam to save time and reach the prison rig. It was also near the sea called Mo Ce, which happened to link the Western Earth Kingdom and the Eastern Fire Nation. Now, I was walking on the bridge that led there. If I hadn't earned the stealth skill, I wouldn't have attempted this just yet. I didn't know how it went so smoothly, but I managed to sneak behind the 2 guards and enter the base, which was offshore. I turned my head and thought about killing them instantly without anyone realizing. But what if someone came from afar and noticed their absence? I knew I had a storage to store dead bodies, but it was almost full. After making up my mind, I decided to move in. The prison was quite illuminated inside. At this time of night, not many people were awake, making it the perfect time and place to do what I desired. However, as someone who played samurai games in my previous life, I didn't dare to walk in confidently. I didn't know if they had set up triggers for alarms or something. The solution I came up with was simple: crawl on the roof. Thanks to my waterbending, it was very possible to do so. And, having reached level 11 in waterbending, it was easier than I had anticipated. Hearing heavy footsteps from ahead, I paused. A firebender, with a mask on his shoulder, was walking and talking to himself. I'm glad my vacation request was approved. Tomorrow, I'll leave. I can finally take a break for 6 months, play with my son and daughter, and have fun with my wife. My mood is so good that nothing can shit on it. Sorry. I thought, as I summoned an ice cube from my storage, turning it into a water tentacle that extended from my hand, wrapped itself around his face, and pulled him upward. The soldier tried to scream, but his face was surrounded by water. He attempted some foolish bending move, but it was useless as I moved my fingers, making the water enter his respiratory system and freeze it from the inside. Defeating an average firebender. Plus 1200 accumulated experience. Waterbending plus 100 express. Stealth plus 200 express. I quickly placed my hand on the clothes, transferring them to my storage, before equipping them. Out of thin air, the attire of a prison guard appeared on me. Thankfully, they had masks, so I didn't have to hide my tanned skin. This should make the assassination process go smoother than I anticipated. I thought to myself. The plan is simple. Kill as many as I can, take out the earthbenders, and spread chaos while making my name known. I made the water tentacle surround the firebender's corpse and freeze it to the roof, sticking him there. I jumped off the roof and landed on my feet. There was a little noise, but it didn't attract anyone's attention. And so, I began walking around. I met a couple of guards on my way. The poor fellows raised their hands to greet me. But too bad for them, they were caught off guard. I placed my hands on their shoulders and started chatting. So, how have you been? I asked. Nothing much, one of them replied. Just ready to get some sleep. Hey, want to cover for me? The poor guy. He didn't know I was using one of the advanced bending skills, the freezing palm. From a distance, it would take a lot of time, but when touching the bodies you want to freeze, as long as they have water in them, they can be frozen. The only downside is that it took 4 seconds to complete. But compared to the 10 seconds it took at level 8, 4 seconds were plenty. Defeating 2 guards. Plus 2000 accumulated experience points. Freeze plus 200 express. As they were chatting, they didn't realize they were already dead. Had I cut their necks or any part of their bodies, the freezing would have been instant. It makes you wonder why the bloodbender in Legend of Korra never froze their enemies' blood, despite being able to bloodbend them. I thought. Maybe that didn't align with their goals. Anyway. I checked my system. The storage, in order to be upgraded, needed 50,000 experience points. It would then go from the size of an apartment to the size of a two-story villa. I'm already sick of hunting beasts, I thought as I emptied my storage of 2 water barrels, put the bodies in, and went to a nearby room to hide them. There were other firebenders sleeping. Lucky sons of fools, they died without feeling any pain. After hiding the bodies and freezing them out of habit, I got out and placed the water barrels back into my storage. I continued touring the prison, taking care of any enemy that appeared in my way. Floor by floor, I was getting closer to my destination. A thick door made of metal stood before me. The whole prison was made of iron. It made you wonder how much money the Fire Nation spent on something like this as a prison. Moreover, it showed the influence the Fire Nation had. Seriously. Thinking something like this would stop anyone. It only works on firebenders and airbenders. I summoned a bit of water and inserted it into the keyhole, before solidifying it and unlocking the door. As I opened the door and stepped in, I saw a flat land with wooden houses scattered about. There were detainees. A few cabins were here and there, but most people were asleep outside. Given the white color of their hair, they were already old. I walked around, my eyes darting left and right. At the edge of the prison were wooden spikes. I walked over to the edge and looked. The prison was very high. If anyone had decided to jump over, they would face serious risks. Jumping from a great height into water wasn't as safe as it looked in movies. One could snap their spine into many pieces. And in this era, without modern medicine, that meant death. Not to mention, even if they jumped using the right technique, there were about 4 ships nearby. 4 ships for a prison. Seems they have guests. I thought as I walked around. I found Haru hugging his legs, not asleep, ignoring me. I guess no one would sleep on their supposed last day in life. Wake up, everyone, and get ready. I'm going to be brief, I said. Haru looked at me. What's the problem? I'm not supposed to die until morning. And I'm supposed to sleep. But here we are, I said, pulling my mask down. Haru opened his eyes wide. Ryak, what are you doing here? He asked. Why are you wearing armor? Hold on, you're a spy this whole time. He looked at me, betrayed. No, I just wore this to sneak in. We don't have time for chit-chat. Wake everyone up before the next shift of guards comes, I urged, holding back the urge to kick him in the head. I have a plan. I smiled warmly at the prisoners who had gathered around me. The smile I wore, however, wasn't genuine. I was simply trying to earn their trust. At any rate, if they wanted to be free, they had no choice but to trust me. And if they didn't, well, in the worst case, I would have to do everything on my own. I've gathered everyone as you asked, Haru said. I looked around. There were only a few young earthbenders here, most of them were past their 40s. Man, the Fire Nation was truly ruthless. But judging by their physique, they seemed well fed. At least their caloric needs were met. Alright, guys. Are you ready to escape this prison? I asked. Why do you want us to escape? A bald man with hair growing on the sides asked. Father, he's a friend I made on the road, Haru replied. How long have you known him? Haru's father asked. For 2 weeks, Haru answered. People who have only known you for 2 weeks don't risk their lives to save you, his father said. He wasn't entirely wrong. If I hadn't gained power in the forest of monsters, I wouldn't have attempted this. No, if I hadn't acquired the stealth skill, I wouldn't have even considered it. There's something in it for me as well, I admitted. And I need all of you. What's in it for you? An old woman asked skeptically. A rebellion, I said. With all of you gathered here, the Fire Nation soldiers won't stand a chance. From the beginning, my goal was to attract attention. Seeing the 3 warships outside, I figured that someone of high rank was here. I didn't believe they had all gathered just to witness the execution of a mere earthbender. They were likely preparing to head to the South Pole. And if my gut feeling was right, the punitive army would leave right after the execution. I figured it would be difficult to deal with all of them at once. So, leading a small rebellion would not only provide me with manpower, but also attract attention. Moreover, if a waterbender became known for leading a rebellion against the Fire Nation in the Earth Kingdom, I would become a major distraction. By creating enough chaos here, I could help keep the South Pole safe. Sounds like a good plan, an old woman deadpanned. But in case you haven't noticed, we can't bend metal, and the nearest land is far from that metal bridge. Even if we miraculously escape, reinforcements will arrive. Without earth to bend, we're nothing but ants against firebenders. My bones are already creaky, and I'd rather not have my skin burned. The other prisoners nodded in agreement. Why not jump into the water? I suggested, tilting my head toward the sea. Do my bones look like they're made of metal? She shot back. I smirked. So, you're afraid of the impact. It's certain death. Besides, even if we survive the fall, the splashing sound would alert the ships, she pointed out. Easy peasy, I chuckled, walking to the edge. The earthbenders followed me. Taking my stance, I waved my arms, pulling water from the sea and freezing it into a smooth, curving slide. The ice wasn't as cold as I could make it, just stable enough for them to glide down safely. A slide. From this angle, you won't hurt your backs, I explained. Just slide down. Once you're all in the water, I'll use my waterbending to create a current that will carry you to shore. The prisoners exchanged hesitant glances, murmuring among themselves. They kept glancing at the ice slide but seemed unable to make up their minds. I understood. I had once raised a bird in my past life. When I first opened its cage, it refused to leave. But eventually, it learned to fly and always came back home. How did I get it to leave? I simply made staying inside scarier than leaving. I thought about giving these prisoners a small push, something to convince them that staying here was the greater risk. I didn't like resorting to underhanded methods, but I needed the earthbenders on my side. Well, guys. I won't force you, I said, walking over to Haru and placing an arm around his shoulder. Life is short. I guess it's not worth living if you're just waiting for your turn. The Fire Nation is unpredictable these days. The message was clear. Haru was set for execution first, and who knew whose turn would come next. The old woman who had been the most stubborn was the first to step forward. She slid down. Then, a second person followed. Let's go, son, Haru's father said. Better to die fighting than die like chickens, waiting. One by one, they followed suit. There were more of them than I had realized. But I didn't have time to count. However, if these people fought on land with their earthbending, the Fire Nation soldiers wouldn't stand a chance in a direct battle, not without tanks and war machines. And even then, earthbenders would still be formidable opponents. Once everyone had gone down, I slid after them, melting the ice behind me. I landed in the water behind the earthbenders and said, okay, guys. You know the basics of swimming, so go on. I then thrust my hands forward, creating a strong current that carried the earthbenders across the sea at the speed of a boat. It didn't take long to reach the other side, where land awaited them. I never thought I'd be free after so long. Is it finally over? I'm happy, I can finally see my grandson again. I clapped my hands, silencing their cheers. It's not over yet, guys. They turned to face me. I continued, by now, most of the Fire Nation forces are asleep, but once they realize you've escaped, they'll rally their troops. I'm sure wise folks like you already know what that means. No offense to the younger ones here. If you don't want to be struck, you have to strike first. So, when the sun rises, I need you to attack every post and guard nearby. What about you? Haru asked. I'll handle the extra ships, I said, turning to glance at the warships in the distance. There were 3 in total, most likely the punitive force meant for the South Pole. Thinking about the South Pole, I still hadn't found the survivor I was looking for, despite infiltrating their massive base. That fool was lucky. Are you certain, young man? Haru's father asked. Even if you're talented, and even though you have an advantage in a sea battle, Fire Nation soldiers have ways to deal with waterbenders. Alone, you can't take them on. I know. Just do your part, I replied, not wanting to argue. After all, my goal was simple, to create chaos. Suddenly, we all stopped and turned our heads. A group of soldiers, who had apparently been out for a nighttime exercise, stood atop a cliff, staring straight at us. We looked up at the top of the hill, where a group of fire soldiers stood, their sweaty faces illuminated in the dim dawn light. They wore loose-fitting clothes, likely finishing their morning workout. Unfortunately, they had spotted us. One of them raised his hand, summoning a flame that flickered above his palm, casting light over the shore. These are the prisoners. They've escaped. And they've taken one of us hostage. They're rebelling. They spoke among themselves as if it didn't matter that we could hear them. You disgusting earth-benders, one of the fire-benders sneered, stepping forward. He looked down at us, his gaze filled with disdain. You've committed a grave sin by escaping prison and kidnapping one of our own. By law, we have every right to execute you here and now. But I'm willing to compromise. Surrender now, put your heads to the ground and your hands behind your backs. We'll take you back and only execute the one who planned this foolish escape attempt. His voice was serious, his tone authoritative. We needed to silence him before he caused trouble. I was about to step forward and shoot a stream of water at him when I felt a pat on my back. Haru was holding my shoulder. When I turned to look at him, he gave me a slight shake of his head and gestured toward the others. I wasn't the only one who was offended. The earth-benders were glaring at the fire-benders with silent rage. They exchanged glances and nodded. Then, I remembered an important fact. One earthbender alone had limited power, but together, they could achieve feats beyond imagination. 10 earthbenders stepped forward in perfect unison. The ground beneath the fire soldiers suddenly softened, pulling them down like quicksand. Before they could react, another group of older earthbenders moved their arms in a synchronized motion, their fists rolling back in preparation. A massive earthen fist formed from the shifting dirt and launched the trapped soldiers into the air, sending them hurtling toward the sea. But that wasn't the end. A barrage of small yet fast-moving rocks shot up from the ground, striking the firebenders mid-air before they splashed into the ocean. You guys have perfect coordination, I said, genuinely impressed. Of course we do, one of them replied with a smirk. For over 10 years, we ate together, slept together, and suffered together. Most of us fought alongside each other against the Fire Nation before we were captured. That's a long time, I mused as I approached the shore where the firebenders had fallen. Raising my hand, I pulled at the water, creating a wave that dragged the soldiers back onto the beach. I was about to finish them off when the old woman, the one who had argued with me in prison, stepped forward. She said, I advise you not to kill them yet. We can use them as hostages in case things take a turn for the worse. I considered her words. She had a point, hostages could be useful. But taking them with us meant slowing our movement and constantly watching them. Not to mention the risk of one of them escaping. No. The risks are too high, I said. If we take them, we lose the element of surprise. Besides, we can always capture more. I placed my hand on each of the soaked firebenders, one by one. They froze instantly. Their eyes darted in panic before their consciousness faded with the drop in temperature. I had been thinking a lot about this world. It wasn't the same as the one I had watched in the cartoon. Being frozen didn't just mean being immobilized, it meant a high chance of death. Getting hit by a rock wouldn't just knock you out or send you flying, it would crack your skull open. A firebender's attack wouldn't just cause injuries, it would burn you alive. Freeze plus 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 plus. Freeze 10,000 60,000. A notification appeared before me. I realized just how much I had been relying on freezing techniques. Well, even if I couldn't use bloodbending yet, mastering ice manipulation would put me in a league of my own. The colder I could make my ice, the deadlier I would become. The earthbenders didn't show any emotion as they stared at the frozen soldiers. Neither did I when the next notification rang in my head. Plus 15,000 accumulated experience. Plus title. The Deadly Ice. Title effect. Minus 40% Kai consumption when using freeze. Plus 30% power boost to icebending. Plus 30% experience gain for freeze skill. Do you wish to equip the title? I examined the newly acquired title. It suited my combat style perfectly. The only downside was that I could only equip one title at a time. But I wasn't hunting beasts right now, so I didn't need the Beast Hunter title. Yes. Title has been equipped. What do we do now? Haru asked. You guys go to the village. Wait for sunrise, then occupy everything. Capture a few firebenders and announce a public execution, I said. I'll go and freeze the warships, anchors. We can't have reinforcements escaping and bringing more troops. A public execution? Someone questioned. Not all of them, I clarified. But we need to send a message to the Fire Nation soldiers who tried to execute one of our own. The sun had begun to rise. By this time, the higher-ups would be waking up, expecting their soldiers to greet them. That was how life worked for Commander Shaw and the warden of the prison. Shaw, who was in his ship, wasn't expecting anyone to barge in without permission, let alone without knocking on his cabin door. The warden stood there, his eyes wide with panic, sweat dripping down his face. I believe someone like you knows the military code, Shaw scoffed. I believe someone like you understands what this means, the warden snapped back. Most of my staff have been assassinated. The prisoners have escaped. And our soldiers are being prepared for public execution. What? Shaw screeched. How the hell did this happen? A public execution, for our men. How did they even manage to escape? Issue the order. Move the ships to the shore immediately. A soldier standing nearby rushed off. Moments later, he returned, his face pale and covered in sweat. Commander, the anchors, they've been frozen solid. We can't move the ships until the ice is melted. What? Shaw roared. That makes no sense. The water is salty. It's not even winter. A voice cut through the room. Makes you wonder, huh? A second later, the soldier who had just reported the frozen anchor turned into an ice statue and collapsed onto the floor. A tanned man with tired blue eyes stepped into the room. Well, I said, smirking. Didn't expect to find two high-ranking officers in one place. I stepped forward. So, which one of you wants to be my hostage? I looked at the two men before me. One was a short, old, gray-haired man who seemed to be the warden, given his luxurious and unique black armor. The other was a tall, young man with black hair, dressed in black silk adorned with the pattern of a golden dragon. I feel that this one is stronger than the captain I killed in the south, I thought. He should be worth a considerable amount of experience points. At any rate, I shouldn't let my guard down. I'll test the waters first. So, which one of you wants to become my hostage? Don't try to resist, I said. But inwardly, I hoped they would resist. I needed a good excuse to earn experience points. Although this was real life, the only difference between it and a game was that a game had an experience bar. Other than that, they were quite similar. When you disconnect from life, the world no longer exists to you. The same applies to games. Though, in games, you wouldn't get emotionally attached. They consider our lives a game to boost their ego. Why shouldn't we treat them the same? I walked confidently. The warden had a scarred, defensive body language. As for the young man, he exuded a confident aura. He stood up. Instantly, the chair he had been sitting on flew toward me. Infusing my kai into my foot, I kicked the chair, shattering it into pieces. It was a good time to bend the ice water cube I had placed by the door. But the young man appeared in front of me instantly, launching a kick toward my face. I tilted backward, my eyes widening slightly as I saw a stream of fire flying alongside his heel. Using my footwork, I jumped back, narrowly dodging the fire that almost burned my face. But it wasn't over. The enemy spun with the kick, creating a circle of fire that distracted me from an inside kick that struck my stomach. Reacting quickly, I used kai bending to boost my strength. But even that couldn't fully nullify the momentum. Since when do soldiers know Taekwondo? I thought to myself, glaring at him. I'm not like the rest of the soldiers you know, he declared. I'm Commander Shaw, a master firebender. You'll remember my name as the great red line you've crossed in your life. You're very humble, Master Shaw, I smirked, brushing the dust off my shirt. This was the strongest firebender I'd fought so far. It meant I needed to keep my guard up around others like Iroh and Azula, and especially the Fire Lord. Since you're a martial artist and firebender, what do you think is most important? I began, two water tentacles forming around my shoulders. Shaw didn't let me finish. He jumped at me, delivering a side kick with fire trailing behind, forcing me to dodge. Not even letting me finish my line, I scoffed. Seems I'm not the main character. It's better if I avoid death flags. One of the water tentacles separated and spread across the floor. You idiot. This is the best bending move you can do. The warden, who had been watching from the sidelines, mocked. You're so pathetic. I was going to say footwork is the most important, I said. Shaw had already taken his stance, forming a fist and stepping forward to strike. But then, he slipped and shot a fire blast toward the ceiling. Without footwork, you can't fight, I said, walking calmly on the ice. More water tentacles appeared on my back, thanks to the ice cube by the door. I clapped my hands and smiled at Master Shaw. What? Never trained martial arts on frozen ground. I smirked. Looks like your training is lacking. Shaw tried to stand and slowly regain his balance on the icy surface. But before he could steady himself, the tentacles on my back attacked him, their ends turning into ice blades. I waved them left and right. Their sheer number made them hard to predict and even harder to dodge. Multiple cuts appeared on Master Shaw's body, and I forced him to his knees. Shit, he cursed. I made the tentacles wrap around his limbs and lift him off the ground. I turned to the warden and said, "Your turn is next. I just need the notification." I was about to deliver the finishing blow. But Shaw surprised me. He opened his mouth wide and shot a massive stream of fire at me. Caught off guard, I surrounded him with water and froze him on the spot. Meanwhile, I crossed my arms, taking the fire head on. The flames dissipated, leaving me with burning wounds. Tisk. It's so painful, I grumbled, looking at my hands. Nothing a little waterbending can't fix, I muttered to myself. Since most of the human body is made of water, it made sense that channeling Kai through it could heal injuries. But first, I needed to focus on more pressing matters. I looked at the commander, trapped inside the icy water. Frostbite or death. Choose, I said. But since you don't submit easily, I'll choose for you. His eyes darted left and right within the ice. The firebender seemed to be able to control his own body heat. I had to admit, he was talented. But too bad for him. I didn't need a hostage. I pointed my hand at him. The ice around his head melted, and the water slipped into his nose, killing him from within. Ding. Defeating a semi-master firebender and an intermediate martial artist. Plus 10,000 experience points. Freezing plus. Waterbending plus 2,000 express. Ding. A skill has dropped. Do you wish to learn the skill tree? Martial arts. New skill has been acquired. He was worth so much experience that it wasn't a waste to kill him. The warden, who had been watching, tried to run. But since the ground was covered in ice, he slipped and fell on his face. I ignored him and melted the ice around the commander's body, then bent the water to form a healing layer around me. A faint light glowed within the water, and my burns began to heal rapidly. It didn't take long for me to recover completely. The sooner they healed, the better. Besides, I didn't want to end up with scars and look like Prince Zuko. Poor Zuko. There was a technique I wanted to develop, but I had postponed it because the circumstances weren't suitable, and it wasn't something to learn on the battlefield. The idea was to use my own body's water to heal instead of relying on external sources. Since a high percentage of the human body is made of water, channeling my Kai through it, or through my blood, should allow me to self-heal while standing. Still, it wasn't something to attempt with enemies around. Not in the forest, and certainly not here. The warden, who had been trying and failing miserably to escape, fell to the ground again and looked at me with fear. Shaw lay there, frozen like a statue. It seemed not everyone was like Aang, able to survive being frozen. Anyway, the ice on the ground turned into water, which surrounded the warden's feet and froze. I approached him. Holding my chin, I mused, would killing you be worth it? The wrinkles on the warden's forehead twitched. Please, sir, he stammered in fear. A week ago, a firebender who had gone to the South Pole arrived here. Where is he, and how much do you know? I asked. He's a survivor. We suspected that his unit was annihilated by a waterbender whom we believed to be the Avatar, he stuttered. As for the man in question, he's been sent to the Fire Nation to retire. He lost both of his legs, so he can't participate in battle anymore. Wait, is that you? Seriously. That motherfooler, I sighed. I give up. I won't kill him. Well, it seems I'm that waterbender, I said, looking at the warden. Not the Avatar, though. I thought of a way to use him. After successfully assassinating 100 men and beasts, you have earned a title. Shadow Lurker. You gain an extra 50% experience when performing an assassination. Stealth upgraded to level 10. I looked at the notifications and realized something. This system, although it doesn't have a way to increase stats directly, still provides significant help through skills and titles. But to equip an extra title, I would need to spend 50,000 experience points, which I'd find more useful for upgrading high-level skills, I thought as I swept my hand through the air. A man I had been dragging by the collar looked at me strangely and said, "Why the hell are you waving your hand in the air?" "Because it feels easier that way," I replied, not giving him my full attention as I focused on my skill screen. Skill trees. Waterbending 11. Kai bending 10. Martial arts 1. Skills. Hunting 9. Fishing 4. Freeze 10. Stealth, passive 10. Titles. 3/1. The Deadly Ice, equipped. Shadow Lurker. Beast Hunter. Accumulated experience. 230,000. Assassinating that many firebenders and fire soldiers had been very rewarding. I couldn't believe my eyes as I looked at the amount of accumulated experience I had gathered. Not to mention, thanks to using my skills frequently, I had earned a lot of experience without needing to dip too much into my accumulated reserves. It was a total win in that regard. Now, there was one problem I had to address. The fact that the warden and the commander thought I was the avatar, based on what the fire soldier had reported. This meant others would likely think the same. Moreover, they didn't know I was no longer in the South Pole, so I needed to force someone to make a report about the rebellion and other events. My eyes naturally fell on the warden. But I couldn't simply force him to write a report, as that would expose the communication methods with higher ups and introduce the risk of sending false information. Anyway, I believed I had achieved my first goal, which was to create enough chaos to attract attention. Now, I needed to find a way to make these achievements known. I held the warden by the back of his neck as if he were a cat. He was relatively small, and I could easily increase my strength thanks to my Kai bending. Plus, I was built like a tank, with muscles to match. I made my way to the village. The ships near the bridge had already been dealt with, and the smell of bodies wafted from them. I didn't want to deal with that, so I decided to leave it to the earthbenders. If you're wondering if killing the soldiers was all I did, you'd be wrong. After achieving my purpose, I emptied the storage a bit and filled it with money, jewels, and anything else of value that could come in handy. I reached the village and spotted some elderly people at the entrance. They had already changed out of their typical prisoners' clothes and into the traditional attire of Earth Kingdom natives. Ryak, one of them called. Hi, I nodded, feeling awkward that I didn't know, or couldn't remember, his name. We've done as you asked, he said. We launched a surprise attack, and it went as smoothly as you said it would. Where are the others? I asked as I entered. There were fewer earthbenders around compared to when I had first arrived at the prison. They're reuniting with their families, he said. Then, his eyes darted down to my hand. The warden. I figured he could be of use, I said, smiling as I threw the warden toward him. If you could, lock him up. Sure thing, he replied, grabbing the warden by the neck. Hey, I won't accept such rude treatment. The warden snapped. The earthbender swept his hand across the ground and then pressed it against the warden's mouth, creating a solid earth strap to silence him. The warden's eyes widened in disbelief as he looked at me. I shrugged. It wasn't my problem that he was being mouthy. Besides, I was utterly exhausted and needed to sleep as soon as possible. The training week had drained a lot of my energy. Unfortunately, I wasn't like a game character that could recover HP and stamina by drinking water and eating. It seemed I was playing in story mode. I decided to check on things and then take a break. So, Ryak, when will we start the public execution? Asked the earthbender. Announce it for a month from now, but carry it out tomorrow, I said. Huh? Why? He asked. Simple. If some of them are planning to escape, they'll make their plans over the course of a month. But if we tell them it's happening tomorrow, they won't have time to prepare. That's quite sneaky. It doesn't align with the straightforward style of earthbending. Everyone is celebrating with their families, but you and a few others aren't. I can guess why, I said, grabbing the old man by the collar. Does going to jail, staying there for 17 years, missing your kids growing up, and maybe seeing your family caught in the war align with your straightforward earthbending? By no means was I a merciful man. From my previous life, I had learned something. If you knock a man down and don't finish him off, he'll get back up and punch you in the back of the head, and you'll be the one leaving on a stretcher. So, no matter what, never play clean. Always play dirty. He took a moment to think about my words. His fists clenched in anger, and he shook his head. No, he said. I ordered, gather everyone and tell them the plan. We're not going to execute everyone, just those who have committed murders and war crimes. It's easy to find witnesses among the villagers. We need the firebenders as hostages in case they try to attack. Roger that, he replied, his head down and fists clenched in anger, anger that wasn't directed at me. I left him and walked through the village to check on things. Many fire soldiers were tied up with ropes and shackles. The villagers were celebrating the return of the earthbenders. I left the village and went to the edge of the settlement. There was a beast I couldn't leave waiting, or it might cause havoc and get crushed by an earthbender. A large tiger cub was lying on its stomach. I approached it, holding some meat I had taken from one of the ships. Lucy, I clapped my hands. Come here. Lucy walked reluctantly toward me, giving me a sidelong glare. I sighed and summoned more food from my storage. I didn't mind showing the storage to the tiger since, well, it couldn't tell anyone about my system or storage. In fact, we were bound by the system. Lucy pounced on the food and began eating. Lucy. Favoritism +5. I rubbed my chin, impressed that I had gained an extra 5 points in one go. I patted the tiger's head, and it didn't attack me, too focused on the food. It was a good thing it didn't try to attack me. I had summoned a water barrel just in case. Stay here, and I'll come back with more food tonight. For now, I'm going to take a nap, I said. I wasn't actually going to nap, but I had one more trick to pull, and then I'd consider my job done. You see, I needed to make my achievements known to the Fire Nation, and the best way to do that wasn't through rumors but through a trusted source. Now, how do I trick the warden? I thought to myself. I placed my palm on my fist and opened my eyes wide. That's it. The warden, Lee, was hugging his legs. He was now under house arrest in one of the homes, and the earthbenders had left him to celebrate. He had never expected this to happen to him in his life. On the day he was supposed to accomplish his greatest achievement, he had been taken down by the waterbender he had originally wanted to target. Was the universe playing some sort of cruel joke on him? Now that he realized the man wasn't the Avatar, he knew his efforts would have been in vain. Not only that, but he had gotten himself arrested and lost control over the prison rig. And that wasn't even the worst part. All of his military achievements were now meaningless. He was a mere hostage. If these stupid earthbenders thought he was of any value to the Fire Nation, they would be wrong. His only value lay in the connections he had made with the higher-ups, and that was it. Sir. Suddenly, a short man with a bad leg stood in front of him after opening the door. It was the same man who had snitched on Haru, the man Lee had wanted to execute. What are you doing here? Lee asked. I've come to rescue you, sir, said the snitch. When I saw that the earthbenders had taken over, I was afraid they would turn their attention to me next. So, I figured the best course of action was to help you and free you. Hurry up, sir. It's midnight, and they're asleep. Okay. The joke the universe was playing wasn't as cruel as Lee had initially thought. He had a chance. He could escape now. But there was a catch. The Fire Lord never accepted traitors or cowards. And he couldn't return to his nation empty-handed. Lee's heart pounded faster and faster as he tried to make a quick decision. Could he escape, even if he tried? There were more than 100 earthbenders gathered, and all of them were waiting for a chance to kill him since he had been their warden. Slipping past them might be possible. He could even try to escape by sea, but how would he evade a waterbender? On the other hand, they thought of him as a valuable hostage. They couldn't kill him if he attempted to run away. And since there was a snitch around, they could take their anger out on him if they were caught. Lee walked over to the snitch and clasped his hand. He had already come up with a plan. I'll make sure to reward you handsomely. I'll give you more money than last time, Lee declared. The plan was simple. Get back to the prison rig, use the secret base's messenger pigeons, and send an emergency report to the nearest base. He would then try his luck. At best, if he escaped or was rescued, he would be treated as a hero for sending an emergency report. The snitch didn't smile at the mention of money. Lee asked, what do you want, then? I want to leave as well, he said. I'll treat you as a citizen of the Fire Nation, Lee said with a smile. But first, we'll have to go to the prison rig. From there, we'll take a ship. As if they could escape a master waterbender in a small boat. They might have a chance if they managed to drift on the water for 6 hours or more. But the Fire Nation was quite far, and it would take weeks to a month to reach it. So, the best course of action was to secretly send his report and then turn himself in. Lee and the snitch, whose name he had never bothered to learn, made their way to the prison rig on foot. Surprisingly, the Earthbenders weren't watching over the village. What a rookie mistake. One couldn't expect rebels to establish an organized army on their first day of liberation. The warden soon reached the metal bridge, and the heavy metallic scent of blood filled the air. He felt a pang of sadness for his men who had been attacked. He turned his head and his eyes widened. The bodies had been gathered and covered in bags, ready to be buried. It was common sense to bury your enemies or dispose of their bodies, as rotting corpses could spread disease. But because they hadn't done so yet, the warden felt his heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. Even though half of the bodies belonged to Commander Shaw's men, they were still soldiers who had served under him. For the 2 decades he had been a warden, they had lived together, eaten together, and trained together. To him, these soldiers were like his own children. He couldn't help but feel a burning sensation in his eyes. He swore in his heart to do everything in his power to take down the waterbender. He entered the prison rig and walked to the top floor. He stood in front of a library, pulled a book, and triggered a mechanism. A secret chamber appeared. Pigeons in cages were eating their food as usual, their cages uncleaned. Only a select few knew about this chamber, which was meant for hiding and reporting. The warden grabbed a blank sheet of paper and began writing his report to the Fire Nation. He explained that a waterbender from the South Pole had come here to lead a rebellion and had succeeded in taking down the prison rig. Also, add that the assumption that he is the Avatar is wrong, said a familiar voice. He's also planning to execute a few while keeping the rest as hostages. He's planning to take down the rest of the bases, and we should chase him down. His name is Ryak. Lee's hands shook. He slowly turned his head to see the waterbender standing behind him. His heart skipped a beat. Then 2 beats. Then 3. For 10 seconds, he forgot how to breathe. He was on the verge of a heart attack. The waterbender had a bit of water swirling around his hand. He smiled warmly at Lee and placed his hand on Lee's chest, using a healing technique that female waterbenders were known for. Did I surprise you? Sorry. But don't worry. I've got you. Your heart won't skip beating for me, unless you're a girl, he said with a wide smile. Now, continue working on the report. Having a level 10 stealth skill was surely handy. The poor warden didn't notice me walking behind him and the snitch until they reached his secret room. A day earlier, the idea I had come up with was a simple one. Since there was a traitor who had sold out Haru, why not use him? I had grabbed him by the neck and threatened him. At first, he refused and grumbled, saying he had done what he had to do to survive and that he should be treated as a good citizen for following the law. When I threatened to make a law that would make him the first to be executed, he became submissive. But on the other hand, I was convinced that he should be the first one to face execution. One could forgive the soldiers of the Fire Nation since they were following orders. But one could never forgive a traitor who sold out his own people. Use them while they're useful, and dispose of them when they're not. And that's exactly what I did. The warden, lying in my arms as I healed his heart, turned his head. The old man with the bad leg had a bubble of ice covering his head. The warden looked at me with trembling eyes, as if begging to be allowed to die. But he couldn't. He regained his breath and managed to speak his first words. I don't think of you as a valuable hostage, I said. Your only role is to spread the information I want you to. If you don't, I'll torture you. Very simple, isn't it? The warden must have tortured many people in his life. Someone like him would know that he would eventually crack. You know I can heal you when you're on the brink of death, I said. And I know mental exercises to keep you from losing your mind. Fine, he said. What do you want me to tell them? Just spread the truth. Make me the top priority, I said. A man who fights for freedom. Not really. I was just fighting for my own freedom. Don't overpraise me, though, I added. I was in my rented room. It was morning, and I had woken up in the middle of the day. The last couple of weeks had been exhausting. The past 2 days were especially draining. My hands were stained with blood, yet I felt no regret. By doing this, the people in the South Pole should be safe. The Avatar would come to this world anyway. The only thing I feared was the butterfly effect my existence might cause. For 100 years, Aang had been frozen in the South Pole, where many waterbenders had lived and died, yet none could find him. It was only when Katara had an argument with Sokka that she accidentally cracked the iceberg holding Aang, reawakening the Avatar. What if such an argument never happened because of me? What if it happened in some other location? Let's not think about the worst-case scenarios, I thought, sitting on my bed, cupping my face, and focusing on what was important. Kai, the cabbage guy, was urging me to find the men from the National Medical Association. It was the only thing that could bring me a genuine smile these days. Other than that, I had more things to consider. Although I had managed to save the South by directing attention toward myself, this village, which had gained its freedom, would soon face a real crisis. There were two possible paths for them. One, they needed to join the rebellion. Most of my tribesmen were there. But on the road, they would encounter soldiers and people allied with the Fire Nation. Not to mention, thanks to the report, the surrounding bases would be on high alert. I thought about it. I could level up my waterbending and lead the rebellion here. But that wouldn't work. I was just one man. I looked at the ceiling. I wished someone as talented as Toph were here. Toph, metalbending. That gave me an idea. According to the show, Haru was very talented and had learned earthbending on his own. I left the room and quickly walked downstairs. I thought that if I gave him insights into metalbending, he could learn it on his own. And if he could teach the other earthbenders here how to do it. What gave the Fire Nation an advantage wasn't their bending power, it was their machinery and advanced weapons. I found Haru standing beside his mother, who could now walk thanks to my healing. Ryak, you're awake already. Want to join us for lunch? His mother greeted. Though, in our case, it's breakfast. Not now, Auntie. Sorry, but can I borrow your son for a bit? I walked over to Haru and wrapped my arm around his neck. What's going on with you? He asked as I dragged him away. Follow me to the backyard, I said, letting him go. He did as he was told. If you're talking about moving out, I can give you a discount. That's not it, I said. Once we were in the backyard, I grabbed a copper coin. I threw it at him, and he caught it. What's this about? He asked, looking confused at the metallic coin. Let me ask you something first, I said. When you earth bend, do you get sensory feedback? He tilted his head. Like, do you feel the weight of the ground you're moving? Now that you mention it, yes. I can feel what I'm bending. Now, look at the coin, I said. Inside it, there are earth particles. Try to feel them. He closed his eyes for a moment but then shook his head. Nothing. What's the point of this? You want me to bend metal through earth? Just keep trying, I said, thinking of a method to teach him how to bend. I remembered reading about an experiment in my previous life that had something to do with brain plasticity. Blind people, through patches on their skin and a camera, could learn to see through their skin. They could even recognize 3D space and react to it, despite never having seen before in their lives. The process, of course, would have to be gradual, starting small. The brain would adapt automatically. At first, their skin needed to adapt to the patch's pressure. Then came the recognition of 2D patterns, followed by 3D ones, and eventually movements, actions, and reactions. Better yet, I smiled, reaching an idea of how to teach him to sense like Toph. At the same time, I realized how I could learn to sense like Toph myself. So, the idea is simple, I said. You need to feel the weight of the earth you're bending, then bend the smallest amount you can while focusing on sensing it. Gradually, decrease the amount. The most important thing is to do it consciously. It was a good idea to teach him how to feel the particles of earth. But it wouldn't let him learn how to see through bending like Toph in a short time. It would, however, lay a solid foundation for him. And it would teach him what mattered most, sensing the earth particles, which would be the key to metalbending. That would give us an advantage against the Fire Nation's machinery in the coming battles. They have tanks. We have metal benders. They have a fleet of ships. We still have metal benders. They have armor. Guess what? We may not have John Cena, but they won't see the metal benders coming. On the other hand, I decided to focus on my own training. I needed to learn how to sense better through water and, perhaps, use humidity. Did you know that a liter of water, when vaporized, can occupy a huge volume in the air? Just vaporize a cup of water and watch how your house fills with steam. That's why using humidity to gather water isn't a great idea. But on the other hand, learning how to use the water in the air to sense surroundings is a good idea, since a small amount of water can occupy a large volume. I get your idea, Haru said, stomping on the ground. A rock flew up from the ground. He extended his hands, and the rock floated between them. But do you think metal bending is possible? He asked. Anything that has earth in it can be bent by an earthbender, I replied confidently. You get metal from earth. Of course, it has earth in it. Even if it's very pure, it still has earth particles in it. And as long as we keep this method a secret, no one will think of purifying the metal to the highest degree. Man, if that logic works, then since we eat food made from earth, we have earth in us. Shouldn't we be able to bend people? But no one has done something like that before, he said. Just play along with me, I replied. In the worst case, you'll unlock dust bending. I paused for a moment, realizing that this conversation was quite thought-provoking. By learning dust bending, one could potentially bend explosive dust. I knew how to make explosive dust from my time in college. If that could be bent and spread in the air, well, you know what I'm talking about, total genocide. Let's refrain from that idea for now, I thought to myself. Yeah, and kill my enemies by making them cough. That's not a bad idea, though, he said, splitting the earth in his hand into smaller parts. He held 3 small rocks and played with them in his hand. There's definitely some weight to them. But if it's smaller than this, I won't feel a thing, he remarked. I chuckled and teased, that's what she said. Seeming to get what I was hinting at, Haru sent a few rocks my way. But I easily dodged them while still laughing. That's not funny, you dirty-minded bison, he sighed, frustrated. His insult only made it funnier. It's not like I made you say the words, I shrugged. Anyway, forget about me. Keep doing that until you can feel the dust. Whatever, he said, turning back to continue his training. On the other hand, I walked to a more secluded area where Lucy, the tiger, was sleeping. Next to her was a water barrel. I extended my hand forward. The water flowed out of the barrel and moved toward the nearest object. With my eyes closed, I tried to feel the water as it hit a nearby rock. I bent it around the rock, trying to sense its shape through waterbending. The system didn't ring with experience gain notifications, as I had deactivated them. This training required focus, and it was the first step for me to develop an additional sense. I had this sense in the past, but it was the first time I was taking it seriously. Soon, I began to get a sense of the water's shape, though no mental images formed yet. Still, it was progress. I tried to spread the water thinner, letting it flow over the grass and surrounding area. It was still hard to feel the shape of everything, but there was progress. After about half an hour, I felt a brain fog setting in and stopped, opening my eyes wide. I found Lucy standing in front of me, as if wondering what I was doing. You hungry? I asked. She shook her head. Since the system had created a mental connection between me and my pet, I could understand what she wanted. Let's play with the ice, then, I said. I bent the water back into the barrel, leaving enough to form an ice ball. I took a bending stance and made the ice ball float. The tiger cub tried to grab it with her claws but failed as I shifted its position. Her eyelids narrowed, and she started jumping after it. It was quite fun to take a break like this. It helped clear the brain fog I'd been feeling. After a few hours, I felt groggy and sleepy. Lucy also got tired and started wandering around. I checked the system to see if my relationship with my new pet had improved, and it had. Lucy. +3 favoritism. No longer fears you as much but is still cautious around you. It was now at 28 points. I sighed. Gaining the trust of a feral cat was a long process, but a rewarding one. Anyway, I thought about continuing my training, but there was that mental resistance. I remembered something. Brain fog is often caused by the accumulation of toxins in the brain during waking hours. When we sleep, our brain cells shrink, allowing these toxins to be cleared. Since I'm a waterbender and can heal, not to mention that my waterbending is at a decent level, why not try to clear the mental burden with waterbending? I went to the barrel, placed my hand in the water, and let a small amount circle in my palm. I placed it on my head and moved it around. After some time, I felt more awake, less sleepy, and could think more clearly. I grabbed the water and smelled it. Yes, the scent had changed to something unpleasant. If I fed this to someone, they'd feel groggy and experience brain fog. I shook my hand and threw the dirty water away. This cheat technique could allow me to train for longer. But to adapt faster, one still needs to sleep, I thought to myself before standing up and continuing. If I master self-healing through blood, I might never get tired again or even need to sleep. I might not even age. Little did I know that I was right. Later that night, I couldn't sleep for more than 2 hours but still felt incredibly refreshed. If I removed the toxins from my entire body, I might need less than an hour of sleep. It made me realize that I could speed up the training of metal benders by healing their brains. Anyway, I continued my training, and my extra sense improved. I could thin the water and better sense the shapes around me. I could even roughly tell the texture of objects. To take my training a step further, I went to the sea and swam while trying to sense shapes more accurately. The plan was simple. Feel the shapes and learn to see through water. Thin the water as much as possible and try to sense through it. Use the water in the atmosphere to sense my surroundings. Most importantly, this method was giving me a lot of experience points for my level 11 waterbending. 3 days later, I checked on Haru, who could now bend dust particles easily. He was holding a metal coin with his eyes closed. As he moved his fingers, the coin floated and twisted into a new shape. I've done it, he roared. I'm the first metal bender ever. And the first dust bender. Who knows? Toph is likely 16 or 17 years old now, I thought. Who knows what she's already bent. Also, there's a whole desert full of sandbenders. So, I don't think you're the first in anything. But I won't ruin your moment. Okay, you're familiar with the process now, I said, smirking. I was proud to see him finish his training so quickly. He wasn't as skilled as Toph, who could see through vibrations in the ground, but he had reached a level where he could sense the earth particles in metal and bend it. Dust bending was an extra skill that could be useful in the future if the Fire Nation wanted to play with explosions. It's all thanks to the head healing water method, he said, nodding. I nodded. That healing water method after training was basically hacking the brain's learning process. But if there was a real hacker here, it was me. Just by leveling up, I gained instant mastery over that level. Yeah, all that's left now is to teach the remaining earth benders. I'll leave that job to you, Haru, I said. Haru. Ryak. Get over here. Tyro's voice called out. He was Haru's father. We turned our heads in the direction of the voice. Dad. What's going on? Haru asked. An envoy from the Fire Nation has arrived, he panted. He says he wants to meet the leader. All eyes turned to me. An envoy from the Fire Nation has arrived, and he wants to meet with the leader, I repeated after Tyro. Tyro nodded. Haru added, it seems you're considered the leader now. We're old folks, Tyro said. Everyone has agreed that Sir Ryak is the one who should face him and negotiate. He's a bit convincing, Haru nodded. He managed to convince everyone to leave the prison easily. Seeing that I wasn't in a hurry to meet the envoy, I turned to Tyro. How is he? What impression is he giving? I asked. He's quite cocky, acts angrily, and keeps glaring at everyone. How is everyone else reacting to him? They're refraining from taking their anger out on him, Tyro said. It's the law of war. You don't kill envoys, or else you'll be labeled a war criminal. It's a law even the Fire Nation respects. Sure, I said. Let's go and meet him, then. At the same time, Haru, I have a very important task for you. What is it? He asked. Go outside the village and trace the envoy's steps. I want to know if they've brought an army with them, I said. Tyro interjected, it's unlikely they could gather a large force in such a short time. We don't know, I replied. It's good to always check. Just in case, we should know whether to abide by their demands or prepare to escape. Leave it to me, Haru said, thumping his chest. You've finally shown yourself, scoffed a man with Chinese features, yellowish skin, long hair tied in a braided ponytail, and a tall stature. He looked like a villain from a Chinese movie, the kind who masters eagle-style kung fu. I yawned, checking him out from head to toe. He was dressed in silky black clothes and wore expensive jewels. Behind him stood 2 bodyguards. I was always here. It's just you who's blind, I replied. Since the envoy was rude with his facial expressions, I decided to match his tone. HMPH. I can't see how a mere small rebellion and prison break led you to act so arrogantly, he said, crossing his arms and looking me up and down. Just because envoys don't often get killed, some of them act rudely. What could that possibly tell me? Did they have the upper hand? Did they think victory was guaranteed? Were they here to make outrageous demands? You should probably see a physician for your eyes. Maybe some acupuncture would help you regain your sight, I said, walking up to the envoy and standing in front of him. There may be an unwritten rule not to kill envoys, but I'm still an amateur, and I could be driven by my emotions. So, if you value your life, please refrain from using informal, rude language with me. We're not buddies. The envoy clenched his teeth but didn't say anything. I could tell he was pissed off. But he was here to do his job. If he wanted to make things personal with me, I'd get personal with him. Fine. I'll list my nation's demands, he said, extending his hand to the left. One of the men behind him stepped forward and placed a scroll in his hand. The envoy opened it and began reading. For the crimes of rebelling against the glorious Fire Nation. For the crime of taking over a village declared as property of the Fire Nation, for the crime. I almost fell asleep waiting for him to get to the point. We demand the leaders of the rebellion to be executed publicly. And for each soldier killed, 2 earthbenders are to be executed. If their number isn't sufficient, compensation will be taken from their families. The earthbenders who attended the meeting widened their eyes and exchanged glances. I could tell they felt fear, not for themselves, but for their families. The number of Fire Nation soldiers I alone had killed would be enough to execute everyone here. If you added the executions, then everyone's family would be wiped out. In case you don't obey these commands, you'll face the wrath of the Fire Nation army. The ground you walk on will be scorched by fire. Nothing will remain of your corpses except ashes, and you won't even have anything left to bury. Soon, Haru approached me and whispered in my ear. Okay. So, they came alone, I thought. 3 days to arrive here after the report. 3 days to get back. A few more days to mobilize the army, which would take more than a week, considering their numbers and the need for rest and food. I should have enough time to train more metal benders, set traps, and, in the worst case, use dust bending. Thanks to my partying in my previous life, I know how to make explosive powder. I crossed my arms and turned my head, laughing. The envoy, who had worn a cocky expression, frowned. What's so funny? Don't you fear the death of your loved ones? He asked. Ha 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 ha. I laughed loudly. Everyone fell silent, so my laughter echoed across the entire village. To begin with, I wasn't fighting for a grand reason. Freedom might be a noble cause, but I was fighting for my own freedom, and only my own. If I gave up my life, I would be giving up everything I've lived for. What we have here are people who've lived 20 years of their lives in despair, I said. Do you think we fear death? I looked behind me. The earthbenders must have realized that whether they fought or not, their families would be executed anyway. If they fought, they might have a chance to save everyone. Some of them could learn metal bending. Some could learn dust bending. And I had more than 200,000 accumulated experience points ready to be used. Do I take your refusal as your final answer? The envoy frowned. Don't just take it. Shove it up your ass, I replied. After the envoy from the Fire Nation had left, I was left alone with the earthbenders and the villagers who had attended the meeting. As people gathered, I turned to Tyro. I asked, is there a reason why killing an envoy is frowned upon? Besides being labeled a war criminal, there's a reason no one kills envoys. All-out war is something you want to avoid in the future. Moreover, if you kill every envoy, the enemy would feel justified in launching sneak attacks without facing criticism. Honor is something the Fire Nation values, so it's better to use it against them. Makes sense. We want them to warn us every time they send a unit, I said, rubbing my chin and nodding. You're wise, old man. When you spend more than a decade in prison, you think about all sorts of things, he said with a smile. Don't dwell on it. Let me ask you, I said, if you could go back in time, would you still escape the prison when I asked you to? Yes. Every single time, without hesitation, he replied firmly. To spend time with my family after so long, I would kill every Fire Nation soldier. I pondered. I had been feeling quite guilty as well, since the villagers and the earthbenders were caught in a mess of my own creation. But knowing that they were following me of their own will made me feel less responsible. They weren't so different from me. I was doing this to save my home from facing a punishing army. Now, this village would face that same threat. A lot of people had gathered around us. They were talking among themselves, and the earthbenders who had joined us looked furious. Now they're angry. They won't even spare the grass. They're going to kill all of us. Shouldn't we have just surrendered? And then what? With the number of soldiers we've killed, all of our families would be dead anyway. It's fine. We have time. If we gather our things and run away today, we can escape now. I looked at the villagers and the earthbenders. It was needless to say that all of them were worried. The fear of death was palpable. Everyone. I stomped my foot. Attention. I'm going to speak. They fell silent and glared at me. I continued calmly. I know everyone is afraid, and I'm not blaming anyone. From now on, I will not take responsibility for anyone's life or death. There are 3 large ships next to the prison rig, ready for you to escape by sea. The land is there for you to escape on foot. But what I want to remind you of is this: we can't win a naval battle, and the Fire Nation's fleet has numerous bases across the islands that we don't know about. On land, they may have scouts and spies ready to catch you if you escape. And we know that for every soldier we've killed, they want 2 of us dead. I wasn't going to give them a motivational talk. I was just stating facts. Your chances of survival, if you escape, are much lower than if you stay. An old man stepped forward and voiced his opinion. So, you're saying that if we stay and fight, we'd have a chance to win. Do you know what weapons they have? Have you ever seen a tank in your life? Do you know their numbers? Not to mention, we don't have enough benders to counter them. I've seen numerous battles during the 100-Year War, and I can assure you, they are furious. No one can stand in their way. Soon, the rest of the villagers nodded in agreement. We do have a chance, a very high one, practically, because they love metal. Haru, get over here. When everyone turned their heads, Haru made his way through the crowd. I grabbed something I had prepared in advance, a leather bag from a lumberjack and a Fire Nation soldier's armor. Excuse me for a second, Haru said as he stood next to me. I handed him the armor. Show them. Stomping on the ground, Haru pointed his hands at the armor and clenched them. The armor squeezed and shrank, compressing on its own. The villagers were shocked. The earthbenders, however, were astonished. They had just witnessed metal bending, something they never thought possible. Metal was something they had lived with, something that had taken their bending away and forced them to live as powerless prisoners. Haru, bend the dust in the bag, I said politely. Haru moved his hands. Compared to bending metal, bending dust was lighter than bending water. The dust rose into the air and drifted a short distance. At that moment, I wished there was a firebender to show them what it could do. Everyone, step back, I said. And wait for me. I went into Haru's house and soon returned with a candle in my hand. I threw the candle into the air. As soon as it made contact with the dust, a small explosion occurred. Since it was far away and the amount of wood dust was small, it was nothing major. We can add a few things to mix with the dust to make the explosion more powerful. With these things filling the air, firebenders won't be able to bend fire, I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Some charcoal, sulfur, we have earthbenders to dig. Saltpeter should be found in caves. I didn't want to resort to this, but if they send an army, it's my best option. Even in this world, it wasn't a big secret that dust could explode. While some were shocked by the dust bending, others began sharing their ideas. You know, Tyro said, if you want to make an explosion, you can simply create friction. Charcoal or coal dust would help if you add it to the mix. The expressions on the people's faces changed. A new element had been introduced, hope. I heard them speaking. Metal bending. Is this possible? You've seen it with your own eyes. It's possible for an earthbender to learn it. I feel like an idiot for spending 17 years in the prison rig without knowing I could bend metal. But most of us here are old. Can they learn it? I raised my voice. You will learn metal bending. If you don't, you'll master dust bending. I know a trick with waterbending to accelerate your training. So, please, for the next week, give it your all. Those who wish to leave, leave. But if you want to stay and defend your home, together, we have a chance. I, too, am a waterbender, and if I wanted, no one could catch me in the sea. But I'm staying here to fight for you. Not really, I'm taking responsibility for my actions. So, fight with me. Will you fight, or will you escape? Who wants to join me? I looked at them, waiting for an answer. After my public speech, my first speech ever, the villagers were divided in half. Not everyone was suited for war. There were kids and old people, and the young ones weren't very skilled at earthbending. In the end, half of the villagers left. The other half consisted of the earthbenders who stayed. They numbered about 100 at best. We also had a few dozen young men who decided to join. Despite the high risk, every earthbender was willing to join the war. I didn't have the right to complain. If I were a weakling, I would have escaped too. On the other hand, I asked them to be escorted to the ships and to hold on. I didn't want them to leave the village until the day before the clash. There was one simple reason for that, to maintain the element of surprise. I wanted to set a large trap for the firebenders and put them in a position where using their power would mean death. I started thinking that I had no choice but to create dust bombs. But before that, I needed to train the earthbenders. With the water healing method, I could remove the toxins from their brains, allowing them to rewire faster and preventing internal inflammation from obstructing their progress. I wanted them to sleep as little as possible and learn as quickly as they could. So, do you think we can learn it before the war? Asked a 30-year-old earthbender. I was currently in a training yard. Haru was standing there, as if he were a military instructor. I believe so, I said. Haru here will teach you the method. In case you want to understand the principle behind it, it's very simple. You bend the earth, the smallest amount you can while feeling it. Then, you make that amount smaller and smaller until you can feel the earth particles in a coin. Once you get that, you'll move on to metal bending. Anyone who wants to give up will have to help me search for stuff in a river or cave. So, do your best now. As you say, they responded. All right, enough talking, said Haru. We've got a battle to prepare for. The earthbenders followed Haru's lead. They did as instructed. And I noticed something, some of them were more talented than I had anticipated. Or, should I say, they had more experience with earthbending despite being out of practice for 17 years. But they were still out of shape. About 2 hours later, I could see the earthbenders were getting groggy. If you spoke to them, they could barely structure a proper sentence. They noticed this themselves, too. Some even said the words they spoke didn't match the ones they thought of. They grumbled and complained. I walked around them, with 6 tentacles wrapped around my shoulder. I placed water on their heads and used the healing skill. They closed their eyes, as if they were experiencing the most beautiful sensation in the world. You could hear grown men, and some women, moaning. I was the only one cringing. But if I wanted to face the Fire Nation's incoming army, I had to endure. Is this my punishment for killing all those men? I thought. This feels like hell, but not the worst hell one could possibly go through. I'd rather go full John Wick on the Fire Army. But I can't do that in the morning. One by one, I managed to restore them to their peak condition. Okay, guys. Stop your training. Get some sleep. When you wake up, do it again, I instructed. Since I had been training my extra sense with this method, I knew they wouldn't sleep much, but they would improve once they woke up. This was the best time-saving strategy. I also noticed that healing their bodies with waterbending was putting a heavy burden on me. Not mentally, but spiritually. How could I explain it? It's the chi energy. I checked the system. Waterbending -11, 60,120 thousandths. I was gaining a lot of experience in waterbending these days. It seems that fighting the firebenders, healing the earthbenders, and training my water sense were all paying off. At this rate, I might not need to use much of my accumulated experience. And even if I did, there was a nearby forest full of monsters. I also had a fast-riding pet, a large tiger, and the Fire Nation soldiers had left strange, lizard-like animals that walked on 2 legs and had high endurance. Not to mention, I had 230,000 experience points, ready to be used to upgrade any of my skills. But I decided to think carefully about it and not rush the decision. Moreover, I was quite tired. So, I took a nap alongside the earthbenders. After the nap, the earthbenders woke up refreshed. As for me, I found it hard to get out of bed in the leather tent. I was half awake, and I could hear them talking. It was quite a quick nap. Yeah, I feel very refreshed. This water healing method is better than getting a massage. Want a lady to massage you? I don't know if they're still open, but I know a town. Anyway, Ryak seems to still be asleep. Young people today are so lazy. No matter how energetic he is, this generation can't keep up with the old ones. I thought, but I couldn't even stand up yet. The warmth of the bed kept pulling me in. You're lucky I need you for the war. I turned my head and found a water pouch. I hydrated myself and then found the energy to stand up. I left the camp and saw the earthbenders working hard on their training. I decided to change my strategy. Healing them like this would wear me out before it wore out the enemy. I clapped my hands to get their attention and gave them new instructions. Only half of them would train at a time. The other half would gather materials, and then they would switch. To my surprise, there were no complaints. I took around 50 earthbenders to a nearby forest with a river. We gathered wood and sulfur. Thanks to their earthbending, we were able to dig for materials and find plenty. We also ground them more easily. After finishing the material gathering, I returned to the training camp and healed the minds of those who were training. This time, I didn't feel as tired or groggy as when I worked with 100 earthbenders at once. For 3 days, I continued working hard for the war, barely getting any satisfying sleep. But we made good progress in material gathering and earthbender training. About 5 of them could bend a metal coin, and a few dozen could now control dust. But that still wasn't enough. I needed them to become more proficient. By now, the Fire Nation envoy would have informed his superiors of my response, and they would be planning an attack. By the 5th day, most of the earthbenders had shown great progress and could bend dust more easily. Around 60 of them could bend metal now. Even though the other 40 could only bend dust, they were still useful. Haru, on the other hand, had advanced quite well. His dust bending had improved, and he could create storm-like dust and even generate wind with it, similar to the sandbenders in the show. While giving the 40 earthbenders a quick healing, I received a notification. Waterbending up to level 12, 200,000. Plus unlocking sub-skills. Steam bending. Dehydration hand. Bending with a mind. Congratulations. You've entered the Grandmaster realm as a starter. After hearing the notification of my waterbending going up, it took me a while to process it. I had been working so hard this month, grinding and using my accumulated experience points. But apparently, there was something I hadn't considered. Healing 50 earthbenders multiple times a day for days had the largest impact. I mean, when you think about it, even if I got about 100 to 150 experience points per person, by the end of the session, I would earn around 7,500 experience points. Do that a couple of times a day, and you wouldn't even notice when you skip a level. Of course, a big part of this achievement is thanks to the firebenders and the operation of breaking the prisoners out. Man, it would be a good time to test the new skills, I thought. But I can't do it in front of all these villagers. On the other hand, I can work on my other skills. But it's been 5 days, so I should scout for the Fire Nation soldiers. Maybe I'll go to the deadly forest and hunt some beasts while I'm at it, I thought. I walked over to Haru, who had been overseeing the others, and asked, Haru, let's have a word. What's the matter? He asked. I want to know about the approaching Fire Nation soldiers, I said. Over the last few days, the earthbenders and some young men had been scouting outside to watch for the approaching army. I doubted we had less than a week before the battle. But one can never be too careful. They haven't seen any army, he said. And there's no black cloud appearing in the atmosphere. Since the Fire Nation used coal and metal machines, there was a unique sign whenever they approached. Black clouds would follow them. That's good, I said. Since that's the case, I'll be heading out. I then put my fingers in my mouth and whistled. A large tiger, around 2.5 meters tall, came running toward me. This was Lucy, the pet I had tamed. Over the last 2 weeks, I had been taking care of her, feeding her and playing with her occasionally. Her favoritism points were now at 50. According to the system, she no longer feared me but still respected me and knew I was stronger. She was also dependent on me. I petted Lucy on the head. Where are you going? Haru asked. I'm going to train my waterbending, I replied. I've learned a few interesting tricks. Why? Can't you test them here? He asked. I can show you, but I want to know how to apply them in a real battle, I explained. That was only half the truth, though. The other half was that I could use them to gain more experience points. And there was a boss-level character in that deadly forest, the giant black centipede. Last time, I barely managed to damage its tail. This time, I would return stronger than ever. I understand. But show me, please, he asked politely. Why? After all that explanation, I sighed. Wanna know a secret? He asked. Sure, I replied curiously. I won't tell you, he said, crossing his arms. That's quite lame, you know. That's how I felt when you said you have new tricks. I might not sleep tonight, he said, exaggerating. I sighed, realizing his point was valid. That feeling was quite annoying. Besides, he had been showing me every trick he had learned. Okay, I said, looking around. There was a skill I wanted to test. First, freezing palm. Usually, it would take time to activate. The longer the distance, the more time it took. Now that I had leveled up with lots of experience points, it should have improved. It should take 1 second at this level with direct contact, I thought. I pointed my hand at some nearby grass. The water inside it started freezing. In a couple of seconds, the grass was completely frozen. Does this work on humans? He asked. As long as they aren't moving. I've used it on humans before, I replied. But now I was different. With the level up, my previous sub-skills had gotten stronger. Here I thought dust bending was dangerous, he said. I waved my hand, melting the ice from the grass. I then touched it, using the dehydration palm skill. The grass withered, turning yellow. A small steam rose from it. I ground the grass between my fingers, turning it into powder. You can take water out of people? He asked. I don't know if I can, I said. But if it's like freezing, I'd need more time to train it. At any rate, if it worked on people, even if it took time to dehydrate them completely, doing it partially could flip the situation in my favor. After talking with Haru a bit more and instructing him to help the earth benders, now metal benders, master what they had learned, I took Lucy and headed to the forest, where a 20-meter-long centipede awaited. Now, I wished it had kids. And preferably, parents. You know, kids would mean smaller giant centipedes, which could amount to a decent amount of experience. Parents would mean larger ones, which would definitely give me a lot of experience points. It took me less than an hour to travel on Lucy's back. Despite her lower endurance, that would only be an issue if she went at max speed, which wasn't necessary. While on the way, I thought about bloodbending. I had begun to reach Grandmaster status in waterbending, to the point where I could now bend with my mind. But there was still no mention of bloodbending. It was the skill that would put me in a league of my own. Now that I think about it, even a genius like Katara or that old woman could only do it during a full moon. Aemon and his family are a rare case, funny. Aemon could bend a bunch of animals with his mind alone. Maybe it's about Kai strength and waterbending mastery at the same time. Or it could be that my path is different, and I'm meant for a unique style. After all, my freezing is so cold that it could kill people instantly. As I dismounted, Lucy extended her tongue and panted. She was tired. I patted her on the back and said, "This is your home, isn't it?" She looked at me as if she wanted to deny it. "Would you like to hunt?" I asked. She shook her head. She was still a young cub and hadn't fully grown yet. I smiled, slapping her back. "Let's take down a giraffe. You can eat it." Lucy turned her head. A 7-meter-tall giraffe was eating grass nearby. She seemed afraid of it, given its size. I summoned a water barrel. I drew some water from it and made it move. Bending it with my mind alone put a bit of a mental burden on me, but I was just a beginner grandmaster, so there was room for improvement. The water moved next to the giraffe's head, shifted its shape, and turned into an ice blade, slicing across the animal's neck. I pointed my hand at the blood that started dripping. The area around the giraffe's neck froze instantly. Its huge body collapsed to the ground. Taking down a large giraffe. Plus 700 XP. It seemed that the ability to bend steam helped. Steam was in the air, and it created a connection with the water I bent, making it easier and faster to control things from a distance. The remaining giraffes nearby ran away. Lucy's eyes widened. She jumped on the fresh meat and sank her fangs deep into it. If I gain enough experience, I'll upgrade the storage. It might be a good way to stockpile food, I thought. If the Fire Nation realizes our trap and decides to lock us in the village, having extra food could help. But on the other hand, there's the sea. I can use my bending to get food from there. I smiled a bit, watching Lucy happily eating. I didn't freeze the body, letting the scent of blood and meat spread, a scent loved by insects. Lucy stopped eating and looked to the side with horror on her face. I turned my head. Between the large trees, I could hear a loud, unmistakable sound. A 20-meter-long centipede was making its way toward me. Here we meet again, I said, waving my hand. I looked at the giant centipede. Despite its intimidating length, which could put any python to shame, it didn't scare me as much as it had the first time. I thought I was getting used to this, the life of danger. It suited me more than my previous lifestyle, where all I did was work all morning, work out in the evening, and fall asleep exhausted. Man, this feels like a vacation compared to the coming war. The water from the barrel swirled around my back, forming 8 tentacles, each with its end sharpened into a blade. If the centipede had a brain larger than a normal insect's, it should know I could freeze water. So, I thought of playing a trick by using the sharp ends as a distraction. Hiding your intent and striking when your opponent is off guard is always a good strategy. The centipede hissed. I never knew they could hiss, and began circling me, spinning around me with me at the center, effectively trapping me. Is it taking me more seriously than last time? I thought this as it continued rolling around me at a very high speed. The moment I let my guard down, it would jump at me and take my life. I couldn't escape in any direction either, at least, not if you considered the space two-dimensional. But we still had the air above. The moment the centipede launched its attack, its head coming from behind, I channeled my Kai into my feet and jumped as high as I could, slamming the tentacles into the ground and using the surface force to push myself up. I found myself flying 20 meters into the air, and luckily, there were huge trees nearby. One of the tentacles extended easily, as if it were another limb of mine, and clung to a branch. Compared to planning for an upcoming battle, this felt like a stress reliever. Maybe because the system acknowledged me as a grandmaster, even as a beginner, it boosted my confidence. My pet, Lucy, felt fear and ran to hide. What a scaredy cat, I thought. But I couldn't blame her. She was only 7 months old now. I tried to push myself toward the centipede's center, but it quickly escaped, seeming to have learned from last time. I stomped, and 2 tentacles joined, turning into a water ball. As I pushed my hands forward, the water ball turned into a compressed stream. The centipede dodged, and I only managed to hit a few of its many legs. They froze, and as it moved, the legs cracked and broke apart. I guess when frozen and supporting a massive body like that, they were bound to break. Okay, it learned how to counter my fighting style from last time. Smart, I muttered. I wanted to play longer, but I need those experience points. I bent the remaining tentacles into a water ball, placing my palm on it. The water started turning into steam as I used my dehydration skill. A skill has been discovered. Steaming. Boil water and turn it into steam. Because of the high level of the freeze skill and the high level of the waterbending skill, this skill requires half the amount of experience to level up until it catches up to the freeze skill. Not now, annoying notification, I thought, my focus entirely on the white gas in front of me. The steam didn't move randomly in the air, as I was controlling it. I need to concentrate it into one point so it can turn back into water. The centipede couldn't have known this new trick of mine. From its perspective, the water just vanished into thin air. It launched its massive body at me. The poor little fella didn't realize I hadn't lost my weapon. It charged into the hot, concentrated steam with endless vigor. The steam cooled down, soon turning into water that froze. Half of the centipede's body was now covered in ice. Its lower half struggled to move. I jumped above it and landed on its back, placing my hand on it. Soon, every ounce of water in its huge body turned to ice. Defeating 500-year-old Black King Centipede. Plus 100,000 EXP. I clenched my fist and raised it in victory. I thought I had done something epic, but unfortunately, no one was here to witness it. Anyway, I wasn't here to brag but to gain experience points. Now, I had around 330,000 accumulated experience points that I could use. I pondered how to use them, or if I should even use them at all. I mean, I could gain more. Frankly, I was quite hesitant and afraid of making the wrong choice. I understood that I could gain experience anytime, provided I traveled to places with dangerous beasts, like that valley the Avatar and the two tribes traveled through. But there was a war coming, and any wrong choice could cost me dearly. The problem was that I had too many good options. Stealth would let me sneak up on my foes at night and destroy a large portion of their army. The higher the level, the better my chances of going undetected. If I leveled up my hunting skill and used my ice projectiles with waterbending, I could snipe a lot of enemies from a distance, taking them down more easily and safely. It goes without saying that waterbending is important. The same goes for Kai bending, which has various effects, from strengthening my bending to enhancing my physical abilities. Martial arts, that skill. I could afford to spend a bit of experience to level it up to a decent level since it wouldn't get costly until level 9. 24,700 accumulated experience has been used. Martial arts up to level 9. Lucy, favoritism plus 20. I rubbed my ear, thinking I had heard an unrelated notification. I was planning to have a moment before saying, I know Kung Fu, but I got confused for a second. Lucy jumped at me from nowhere and started licking my face. Looking at her, I realized she was terrified. She must have thought I had protected her from the centipede. Poor, naive fella. I patted her head. Well, as long as I'm grinding favoritism points, it's good for me. Now, Lucy, stand up. Daddy has some thinking to do, I demanded, and Lucy stepped back. I sat down and said, Lucy, since defensive wars are battles of endurance, preserving your bullets, in my case, chi energy, is essential. Daddy can't get tired, right? The tiger tilted her head. Despite understanding me thanks to the system, she couldn't grasp what I was saying without proper context. She went to the side and continued eating her giraffe. I also had the steaming skill to focus on. 12,000 express has been used. Steaming up to level 9. 40,000 express has been used. Kai bending up to level 11. Skill tree has been improved. You have gained mastery in Kai control. Energy waste is minimized. Can now use Kai to cover the body with a protective aura. Can now achieve a 100% boost in physical enhancements. 30,000 express has been used. Freeze up to level 11. I decided to review my stats and test the skills as they were. I focused on the centipede's icy state and froze it again. The ice became colder, almost twice as cold as before. Then, I turned the ice back into water and used the steaming skill on it. The last time I turned water into steam, it took a bit of time. This time, however, it turned to steam almost instantly. In a flash, a hot cloud of steam covered a large portion of the forest. I quickly cooled it down, and now, mist filled the air, which dissipated after some time. So, I have freeze, which is overkill. And if I level up my steaming skill, I'll be able to burn my enemies. If I focus that steam on someone, I'm sure I could cook them. Ignoring my growling stomach, which was starting to interfere with my judgment, I took a look at my stats. Skill trees. Waterbending 12. Kai bending 11. Martial arts 9. Skills. Hunting 9. Steaming 9. Fishing 4. Freeze 11. Stealth, passive 10. Titles. 3/1. The Deadly Ice, equipped. Shadow Lurker. Beast Hunter. Accumulated experience. 224,000. Okay. I had a decent amount of experience, and I felt much stronger than before. The war was only a few days away. And I could gain more experience points as long as I stayed in this forest. It might help me upgrade not only my skills but also my storage and the number of titles I could equip. By not upgrading my skills further, I could gain experience through practice, maximizing the benefits. I began hunting for beasts. The amount of experience they gave individually was small, but together, it added up to a considerable amount. After hunting a few packs of dog-like beasts, I ended up with an extra 26,000 experience points. Just as I was taking a break, a young man named Camus from the village, a non-bender, came to me. He was riding a fast mount, which explained how he got here so quickly. Sir Ryak, he called. I looked at him. What's the matter? I was afraid he would say the Fire Nation had attacked, which wouldn't make sense since we had scouted the area and hadn't seen their army approaching. It's not like an army can move faster than one person. Ah, about that. Let me think for a moment, Camus said, trying to recall. Right. 2 people are looking for you, he said. Oh. My eyes widened. How did they look? I asked. A girl and a boy. Light tan. Blue eyes like yours. Matter of fact, you guys seem to be from of the same tribe. Camus replied. I couldn't help but widen my eyes when I heard that 2 people with the same racial features as me had come to see me. If that meant anything, it would mean Sokka and Katara. Given that Camus didn't mention if they were old, it likely meant they were around my age. If they came from the South Pole, there were only 2 people in mind, Sokka and Katara. Before I left, I had tasked them with actively looking for that bald monk. Since then, I had been quite busy, chasing someone across the sea, grinding my levels, fighting for the prisoners, and planning for a war, so I had lost track of time. I rubbed my temples, not taking the news very well. Usually, someone would be happy to learn that the people they grew up with had come to visit. But for me, it caused anxiety. There were 2 possibilities. 1, they found Aang, and everyone could leave the mission of saving the world to him and relax. But the problem was that they came alone. It might be that these 2 came to look for me, and Aang was relaxing somewhere else. The second possibility, they didn't find Aang, and because of the butterfly effect my existence had caused, he would remain trapped in the ice until fate decided otherwise. At least it's not the worst time for a visit, I muttered. The worst time, obviously, would be during an active war. Currently, I was riding Lucy, heading back to the village. It didn't take me long to arrive at my destination. But I took extra time to bathe and change my clothes. I had been through some tough grinding and seriously needed to clean up. Soon, I found myself in front of the village. Walls had been built, and in front of them were deep holes. They were easy to construct since we had 100 earth benders. The walls and holes wouldn't hold back the Fire Nation army indefinitely, but they were meant to slow them down and give us breathing room. If we fought them in open space, we were as good as dead, whether we had metal benders or explosive dust or not. The biggest advantage in a defensive battle was walls and location. That's it. I bypassed the wall and found myself in the training ground. The earth benders were gathered, talking. Some were training their dust bending, while others practiced metal bending. I walked in, forgetting that I had left Camus behind since Lucy was too fast for his ride. Suddenly, my senses perked up. A smack landed on the back of my head. Instinctively, I rolled and grabbed the arm, throwing whoever tried to hit me to the ground. I was met by a familiar face. And luckily, it was a male's face. That's how you say, hello, now. Sokka groaned in pain. Nice to see you healthy, Ryak. I smiled slightly and extended my hand to help him up. Since we were the same age group, me, him, and his sister, we had been somewhat close in the South Pole. Sokka and I used to fish a lot together, so I was glad to see him doing well. Would it be appropriate to ask him where his sister is? I mean, it's not like she kissed me, and I kissed back. He shouldn't be surprised, though. I was the only boy in the South Pole who wasn't her brother. What are you thinking about? He asked. Nothing. I'm just counting the time since I left the South Pole. I see. You want to ask about that Baldy. The spirits didn't tell you. He asked. I wasn't sure if he was being sarcastic or suspicious of me lying. Even if he didn't believe the excuse I made up for knowing the Avatar was in the South Pole, I had more credibility since I claimed the spirits gave me bending power. Anyway, given the way he was talking, it was obvious the Avatar was still sleeping somewhere else. I'd think about the consequences of that later. Why? Want them to visit you and make you a bender too? I asked. That's quite lame, he replied, taking my hand and standing up. Speaking of benders, where's Katara? I asked, looking around. She's talking to the villagers, Sokka said. Anyway, since when did you turn into a warlord? Was that your idea of causing a distraction and drawing attention? Most of the villagers were near the port and weren't allowed to leave because I didn't want to expose my weapons and tactics. That's why I spotted a brunette in blue attire talking to a middle-aged woman. I didn't think well at that time, I admitted. You never think well, he said emotionally. But thanks. You saved my sister and the whole tribe. That's something I've overlooked because of the situation. Yeah, I know. Though, that kiss was sudden, I sighed. That wasn't unexpected. When you're the only guy around who's not her brother and you spend a few weeks learning bending together, someone's bound to bend over. I was going to talk about how Rakasha was contacting the Fire Nation soldiers to tell them about how we had a waterbender, he replied, his eyelids tightening. I turned my eyes slightly and looked at the sky. I think I had brought up the wrong topic with Sokka, who happened to be her brother and is also very protective. The weather is nice today, isn't it? I said. Don't change the subject, he insisted. The stars are beautiful, I commented. It's morning, he deadpanned. The sun is just a big star, I explained. In our home, you only see it for 6 months a year. You're unbelievable, he exhaled through clenched teeth. Very well. What's with this war I'm hearing you're planning against the Fire Nation, and why the hell are only 100 benders and 33 non-benders excited for it? I turned my head, seeing a few women working on grinding powder, which, when mixed, could create an explosion. Even a small amount was capable of blowing a human's limbs in different directions. Ryak, I heard a feminine voice. Turning, I noticed Katara approaching. Katara, long time no see, I greeted. How's everyone back there? They're doing quite well, she replied. Thanks to you showing me new tricks in waterbending, I was able to help Sokka provide enough food for over a year. The tribe can take care of themselves in the meantime. That's good to hear, I replied. Anyway, what are you guys talking about? She asked, looking between me and her brother. Sokka answered quietly, the weather. Did you know the sun is just a big star? Why does that matter? She tilted her head. Nothing, really, I interjected. So, what's this about a coming war? What happened since you left the tribe? She said. Is there anything we can help with? That's going to be a long story, I said. But let's have a recap. Hold on. There's no way you entered a prison rig with only a water barrel and defeated everyone. Sokka remarked in astonishment. If there's a will, there's a way, I said. To be fair, if not for the system, there's no way I would have attempted that. I would have trained for years and years. Not everyone is like Katara, who, in canon, trained for a month and defeated a waterbending grandmaster who had trained for generations. Well, to be fair, if not for the system, I wouldn't have gotten my waterbending power. I have to agree with Sokka, Katara said. I know you're talented at waterbending, but there's no way you could learn that much in such a short time. Even with a month of training, I barely developed your moves. You developed them? I asked. If I recall correctly, the waterbending I had shown her was around level 8 or 9 according to the system. If she could master all the moves and even improve them slightly in a month, then she's good. Can you show me? I pointed at a water barrel nearby. Sure, she said. She stood up, took a bending stance, and bent backward. The water flew from the barrel toward her. She rolled and spread her arms. The water took shape around her hands and expanded, the ends turning into ice masses. I've improved the shape shifting, she said. Also, this. As she moved her hands, the shape of the water split into two, creating 2 tentacles from her hands, which she could control and use as whips. I clapped for her. That's a very good improvement. She was just half a step away from being a master. I could spend time teaching her to help her achieve that faster. But the only problem was that I didn't have the time to do that, nor was the current situation convenient. That's very good, actually. You're not far from being a master, I praised. How would you know how a master bends? She asked. I've been in this land for a month, I replied. It's easy to hear rumors about waterbenders. Really? Yes, I replied. I've also heard that there may be waterbending scrolls in the black market. Anyway, forget about that, she said. I want to see how you manage to beat those guys. Well, I'm a bit tired since I've been hunting, I replied. But in any case, this should be enough. I waved my hand. The water left her hands and stuck to mine. I placed my hand on my back, creating 3 tentacles on my right side. This is just it, I said. The tentacles moved and wrapped around Sokka. One of them entered his mouth. I know it's a dirty move, but it's quite amusing for me. Sokka gagged a bit. How in the, Katara's lips trembled. You didn't even make a bending stance or move. It's just that you have to do so until it becomes easy, I replied. But it hasn't even been a month, she said, astonished. The water tentacles fell to the ground. Seeing her looking down at her feet, I ignored Soka's coughs and patted Katara on the back. What's the matter? I asked. I'm really happy that you've advanced, she said. It's just, I feel like my talent in waterbending isn't something special. I feel like trash. Hold on a second. Did I just make the most talented waterbender in the original show think of herself as untalented? I mean, she learned what I learned with the system and managed to improve it on her own, without having to go through crazy battles or hunt like a madman like I did. And why is that? I asked. I've been a bender since I was little, she sighed deeply. But I've never managed to reach the level you've reached, despite trying to discover tricks for years. Yet, here you are, and in just a few months, you're like this. What does that make me? But honestly, I'm happy for you and for myself. There's a man I can rely on. Sure, I replied, not knowing if she was flirting or venting her feelings. Let's try flirting back while encouraging her at the same time. But I also need a woman to rely on. She looked at me, her eyes sparkling. But I'm not that good, she replied. Nah, I just had a trick to help me, I said, grabbing her hand. There's something that can help you with your bending. If you learn it, you can not only help yourself but also your brother and everyone in this village. Sokka looked at me with wide eyes. I mean, I would have the same reaction if someone flirted with my sister in front of me. What is it? She asked. It's called healing with waterbending, I said, taking my hand from hers. I used one of the tentacles to create a small cut on my palm. Blood flowed out. Ryak, are you crazy? You could cut a vein and die. Katara scolded. The water from the tentacle swept over my hand, and the wound vanished. What did you do? Sokka asked, taking my hand and examining it. It's called healing, I said. I've heard rumors that women in the North Pole are used as healers. So, I tried channeling my Kai through water, and ta-da. Wow, Katara replied excitedly. But how does that help you learn bending? I'll explain later, I said. For now, focus on learning it. I then grabbed Sokka and smacked him on the back. What would a little sister do without her good old brother? It was another way of saying that he had just become a test object, a grinding stone for her to hone her skills. Hey, I never saw. Sokka was about to object but paused when he saw Katara's eyes lighting up as she looked at him. I understand, I replied. You couldn't help her in the South Pole because you couldn't. But even now, you wouldn't. It's not like you didn't want to from the beginning, right? Sokka sighed heavily. Fine. But be gentle. I'm sure she'll learn it in no time, I said, patting him on the back. For now, guys, it's about to be nighttime. Katara held Sokka's arm and dragged him away. I dispelled the water from my back and returned it to the nearby barrel. I felt sorry if anyone attempted to drink that water, as someone had already gagged on it. In fact, it felt like a hideous thing to do. So, I lifted the barrel and went to hide it in storage so I could use it in a fight later. By the next day, most everyone had learned how to dust bend and metal bend. When it came to dust bending, their movements didn't seem amateurish. Some could create a joint tornado with dust alone and generate winds. Others could shapeshift with metal bending. Haru was the most advanced in that aspect. I had a good army. On the other side, Sokka was quite lucky. His sister mastered healing the first time she tried it. When she learned that the new metal and dust benders used water to heal their brains to learn faster, her morale shot up, thinking I had used this trick to get better. Well, she wasn't entirely wrong. I had used this trick in the recent past to train my aqua sense, which I had postponed to train the metal benders and search for explosive materials in nature. But thanks to Katara sharing the burden of healing the earth benders with me, we could do the job faster and with less exhaustion. In these harsh times, there was one person who could be called happy. Sokka, who had lived most of his life in the South Pole, saw a girl around his age among the villagers. He couldn't help but flirt with her. I couldn't blame him, though. He had started to see women who weren't his sister, mother, aunt, or either too old to be taken to war or too young. Man, I'm glad he left the South Pole. Otherwise, he might have developed a taste for either too young or too old people. On the other hand, I was spared from such a miserable fate. For a couple of days, things continued peacefully. I spent more time with Katara, who started applying my trick on herself. At night, we would meet and talk about home, sometimes about the continent here, and I would tell her about the forest and my adventures training against large beasts. She didn't believe me at first until she saw Lucy, the large, growing tiger. Lucy had shown hostility toward Katara at first and tried to bite her hand when she placed it on mine. But I managed to control Lucy and told her not to attack her, mommy. Seeing that, Katara didn't seem traumatized, but she blushed slightly. Now, it was morning, and I was watching over the camp. So, Ryak, Katara, who was talking to me, suddenly spoke. What are we? What? I turned to her, my heart skipping a beat. We are humans, not dinosaurs, I thought. That's what a typical shonen anime character would say. She's asking me if we're just friends, dating, or not. But Katara, you know, there's a war going on. One doesn't know if they'll live to see tomorrow, and here she is, thinking romantically. But on the other hand, I couldn't blame her. Back in my home world, in many countries suffering from bombardment, famine, war, and rising pollution, the human breeding instinct was stronger than anything. I mean, as she said, looking firmly into my eyes. You know, I said, if you're thinking about dating and all that, we can leave it for after the war or when this passes. Great, she said, smiling nervously. So, once this is over, we're in. Everyone. Suddenly, a man riding a lizard-like creature screamed. When I turned to him, I saw him dismounting while panting loudly. A few earthbenders went to help him. It seemed he had run all the way here from his post without taking a break. Well, his ride had run, but for him to pant like that, it seemed there was something else besides exhaustion. I've spotted the Fire Nation forces. They're in the thousands. Tanks, drums, rides, everything. Thanks for watching.